Hey guys, you are watching your anime world. How are you all? Please support to subscribe this channel for watching new interesting stories. So in this video, we will see what if Deku led a class of reformed vigilantes and villains. Here is short summary. Izuku and Bakugo, Dabi and Shoto, Kaminari and Mina and Kirishima, and Shinsou are all vigilantes or villains, and Eraserhead doesn't think they deserve to be criminals, so of course he collects them all and brings them into a class he has created at UA. A villain and vigilante reform class. But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if possible share this video with your friends. Now let's start the story. Izuku practically growled at the hero in front of him, glaring daggers at the man. He did not trust anyone, let alone heroes. That's what you get when you're one of the small percentage of people who are quirkless. The diagnosis had ruined his life. Before it, he could pretend. He could pretend he would be a hero, or at least a somebody. Then he had been told he would never amount to anything. His mother hadn't exactly put up with him much longer after the diagnosis, so he'd left. He couldn't cope with his mother's heartbroken looks mixed with glares of hatred, swapping so quickly Deku hadn't known what to feel. So, just like that, he'd left. Being 6 years old and quirkless on the streets had advantages and disadvantages. He had to be far more careful, knowing that if he was caught and put in foster care he would likely get killed for being quirkless. The 6-year-old part helped though. People had been nicer to him back then, sparing food far more often. Now, 14 and well able to fight for scraps, he got no such sympathy. He had worked hard, making sure he could defend himself against quirks. He had even made some sort of difference through his vigilante work. He was fine. This was good. He was hungry, but he was good. So why was Eraserhead here? Why was he telling Izuku to surrender like some villain? Kid, if you surrender, I can work something out. I can keep you from getting thrown in jail. If you fight me, there will be no such kindness. Leave me alone, Izuku snarled, backing up slightly. Not because he was scared, although he was a little admittedly, but because his one friend in the entire world was sleeping and Deku needed to be closer to him, so he would wake. They had to run, they had to get out of here. Kid, you shouldn't be out here alone. Go away, Deku yelled, trying not to show his fear. He would not let his friend get hurt. He would not let his friend be found. Even if he was caught, as long as Catch-on was okay, Deku would be okay. That was all he needed. He needed his Catch-on. Kid, Eraser started, only to be cut off by a loud explosion headed his way. Catch-on was awake. Let's go, Izuku screamed, and they ran, terrified of what the hero could do. You should not have attacked my husband, a voice stopped them in their tracks. The sound waves physically held them there for a moment, and by the time they could move, the hero's hand had gripped each of their shoulders. Izuku struggled wildly, trying to tear himself free, while Catch-on seemed furious at the lack of his quirk. Mike, stop. That was Eraser this time, likely holding Catch-on's quirk hostage. That just made Izuku more frantic. Catch-on's quirk was everything to the boy, how dare this stupid hero take that from him? They attacked you. We are supposed to be bringing them in. They are kids. Come on Mike, just don't hurt them, okay? I would never, Mike yelled, and Izuku winced at the pure volume of the yell. Bakugo at least seemed oblivious to it. Advantages of being partially deaf. In a moment everything moved as one. Mike's voice was quieted, Bakugo's explosions were let off, and Izuku was dropped, giving him the escape chance that he had needed. Of course, Eraser didn't let them get far, and once again Izuku found himself caught. He squirmed desperately, hating the way the cloth circled him, controlled him, like that leash. No, now was not the time for stupid flashbacks. He was fine. He had to be fine. Catch-on needed him to be fine. Catch-on, Catch-on, Izuku screamed, unable to see his friend. Catch-on had to be okay. He had to be. He could feel the cloth tightening around him, holding him, and all he could think was that if he went back there and Bakugo followed, Bakugo would be dragged along with him. Bakugo would be sacrificed, killed along with him. He couldn't let that happen. He couldn't let that happen to Catch-on. Here Deku, I'm here, You're okay. You are okay. Let him go, Eraser. Deku, can you hear me? You're safe. It's not real. It's not like then, Kachon insisted, and while the tight straps around his body didn't disappear, the panic gripping him at least lessened enough for him to gasp for air, not even realizing how far he had been gone, how dark his vision had gotten. Let him go. He's having a panic attack. Let him go. Kachon screamed, and Deku finally found the boy in his vision, fighting against Mike's hold, desperately trying to reach out to him. He was alive, but he had to go. He had to get out of here. They were coming. The monsters were coming for Izuku, and Kachon was going to get hurt too. He had to get out. Kachon, get out. Leave me. Get out of here, please. I'm not going anywhere, idiot. Let him go. By the time Eraser heeded Kachon's request, Izuku was crumpling to the ground. He had broken free for a minute, enough to tell Kachon to run, but then he had been dragged back there. The feeling of being tied up to die led to the altar to be sacrificed. All of it had come back, and Izuku didn't have it in him to find another breath of air. Bakugo, what the is wrong with you? Let him go, you monsters. Let me help him. I'll do anything, just let me help him. What happened? Eraser asked, sounding shocked to his core. The man would probably have seen many panic attacks in his time, but Izuku wasn't exactly normal. When he panicked, no quirk activated to protect him, unlike most. When he panicked, he seemed almost normal, but his eyes. It was always clear in his eyes, at least to Bakugo. Izuku would go back to whatever hellhole he had remembered from his time before Bakugo, and his eyes would stare forward, unseeing. He would forget to breathe, forget to do anything, and Bakugo was supposed to bring him back. He always brought him back, but now Izuku was on the ground, and they weren't letting Bakugo go to him. Aizawa looked away from Bakugo long enough for the vigilante to activate his quirk, diving to Izuku. He ripped the scarf away from the other boy, calling Izuku's nickname, desperate for a reaction. He was breathing at least, which meant he was probably unconscious. If he were awake, he'd probably still not know how to breathe. Please be okay. Please be okay. Zuku, please. I can't lose you. I can't lose you. You promised me. You promised you would be okay. What happened? Aizawa asked, voice quieter, closer this time. Bakugo spun around, placing himself between Izuku and the hero. No one would touch Izu again. Never again. You happened. You happened. Bakugo screamed, I told you to let go. I told you, but you didn't listen. You all. This is exactly the sort of shit heroes always pull. You and your better than thou, shit and stupid ass belief that you know more than everyone else. Well, guess what, dipshit? You don't know shit. We'll take him back to Recovery Girl, she will help him. He will be okay, Present Mike insisted, and Bakugo turned to glare at him. You think I'm letting you touch him again? Think the again. He needs help. Apparently so do you Get thee away from my friend. We can help you. Get thee away. Bakugo snarled, baring his teeth like the animal he felt like. He didn't even care. He didn't care what they thought of him. He needed them to clear out so he could protect Izuku. He had to protect Izuku. Catch on. Izuku whispered, sounding petrified, and Bakugo instantly turned to his friend. I'm here, Zuku. You're okay. You are okay. Everything is going to be fine. Catch on, I think I fell in something. What? Bakugo asked, confused. He had expected a lot of things to come from the tired lips, but that was not one of them. I think. It's all wet. I don't know, is it raining? Catch on. Shit. Bakugo rolled the boy over, and sure enough, glass wounds coated the side of Deku's stomach, because of course the luckless idiot would fall into a smashed glass bottle. What the actual? Did the universe hate them? Shit, one of the heroes hissed behind him, and Bakugo forced himself to stay focused on Deku. He was not going to let his shouting be the last thing Deku remembered. You're okay, it's nothing, just a little scratch, okay? Just keep looking at my face. Zuku, you got that? Just look at me. That bad, huh? Izuku joked, before wincing at the pain that spiked at the movement. Damn, the nerd knew Bakugo too well. You will be fine. Okay, you just have to be strong. You will be okay, trust me. We need to get those out. Eraserhead started, only for Bakugo to turn on him, his tone immediately changing. Like you haven't done enough. He snapped, before turning back to Izuku. You're okay, I promise. I'll protect you, just like I always have. Okay, catch on. Izuku sighed, his head dropping slightly, and his eyes fluttering. Zuku, stay with me. Understood. Stay with me. You will be okay, just keep your eyes on me. Let me help. Eraser practically begged, and Catch-on needed Izuku to stay awake, so he had to focus, which meant he needed help. He hated this, but he couldn't fix it. Fine, get the glass out of him, Catch-on snapped, before turning to Izuku again, putting the other boy's head into his lap. Zuku, look at me, I need you to talk, okay? Can you tell me all about Eraserhead's powers? Come on, I know you've got an analysis. Talk to me, yeah. Most quirk theorists are wrong. The hair is probably not a passed down factor. That's pretty uncommon, especially because that theory doesn't relate his hair to his actual quirk. Which suggests two quirks, which is usually only created through a bit of luck mixed with careful breeding. A much more logical reason is to do with his actual quirk, because it's probably an electromagnetic field that hits the quirk gene in the DNA, which suggests that he has a constant electromagnetic field on him when he is using his quirk, which would explain the hair being lifted up like static electricity, because that's actually what it is. The red glowing eyes helps that theory because red light is the longest wavelength, so it would be able to get into the genes the easiest, and light and electromagnetic spectrums are connected, so it makes even more sense that they would be connected. Also, no one ever talks about the fact that he probably has night vision when he uses his quirk. Because the red won't glare as much, and his pupils wouldn't have to keep readjusting to the different brightness levels, which is so epic and useful, and even better is the fact that it minimizes eye strain, which is extra useful for his quirk, and it is hard to see at a distance, so it doesn't compromise his position. And Izuku's mumbling went on, getting to the point where Bakugo could barely understand the words, but it didn't matter because Izuku was awake. Izuku was awake and safe, and he was talking, and Eraser looking terrified of them, which was priceless. He's bandaged up, but we should get him to Recovery Girl to undo any damage caused by blood loss. Just because I let you help doesn't mean I am letting you take us anywhere. Face it, kid, I could capture you in a second, and we don't even have to try worrying about this one in this state. Either the two of you come with us to Recovery Girl, or we will take you to jail and tell Recovery Girl to meet us there. Catch on, I'll be fine, I'll go with them, you hide, okay? We can find each other again. I've escaped plenty of places before. We will be fine. I'm not leaving you, idiot. But, no buts, I'll come with you, that way we can escape together, okay? You guys probably shouldn't talk about your plan in front of us, Present Mike pointed out awkwardly, only to receive a glare from Bakugo. Shut up, it's bad enough I'm coming with you. Don't go being all chatty or I might just kill you both and find some sort of makeshift hospital for vigilantes. Like one of those exists. I know a place. The only cost is a taste of blood, doesn't even have to be our own. I'm sure your blood would get us quite a few good treatments. What the? As I said, I know a place. Now, are we going to do it your way or mine? Come on, kid, Eraserhead grunted, standing up. Present Mike moved to pick up Izuku only for Bakugo to snarl at him enough that he backed off. No one was touching Izuku except him. Present Mike tried to argue, but a glare from Bakugo was enough to ward him off. With that, Bakugo picked Izuku up gingerly, carrying him bridal style to avoid aggravating the injuries. You're lucky you are such a twig, Bakugo teased gently, before following awkwardly behind the heroes. If it had been him with the glass stuck in him, he would have never let Izuku do this, but Izuku seemed too terrified of losing Bakugo to argue, and Bakugo was fine with that. Chapter text. Shoto Todoroki watched his brother apprehensively. Dabi had insisted that their need for medicine was worth the literal blood sacrifice, but as Shoto watched the blood dripping into the Saika's cup, he didn't know what to feel. Sure, it was far better than with his dad, and he was desperately happy that Dabi had managed to get him out, even if his sister had refused to leave and Natsuo had already moved out to college. Whatever happened, Shoto would stick with his brother, but that didn't mean he was too keen on how they had to do things these days. The two were well-known vigilantes, simply known as Fire and Ice. There was no way Shoto would ever use his fire, so he was ice, Dabi was fire. It was that simple. They had met a few other vigilantes once or twice, his favorites being Blasty, who insisted that wasn't his name, but also refused to give one, and the hacker kid, who had tried to claim All Might, but ended up going with Deku. There were a few other villains and vigilantes he had met, but they didn't exactly keep in touch, so mostly it was just Shoto and Dabi. "Time to go, I've got the goods," Dabi called, and just like that, they left, far too aware that sticking around a vigilante and villain med center wasn't exactly safe, even if the heroes didn't appear to know about it. "Where to next?" "Gotta get some food, we've got time before nightfall to head to the river, see if we can work on using your ice to catch fish yet." Shoto nodded happily, following his brother. He really didn't care what they did. Dabi would look after him, and that was what mattered. "Fire and ice is it?" A voice called from the sky, and Shoto stopped, spinning around to see who had said it. Hawks. The hero had worked with Endeavor a few times. Shoto distinctly did not trust him. "Kill Endeavor and maybe I'll grace you with an answer as a down payment on the favor," Dabi sneered, pulling Shoto behind him. He still did that. No matter how strong Shoto got, Dabi was always still too afraid to let him fight. "Ah, hate your old man that much, Todoroki's. What's it to you?" Dabi snapped, and Shoto readied his ice. "Ah, I can't blame you, I ain't even gonna suggest you return, despite that being what he asked me to do if I ran into you." "What the do you want, bird brains?" Dabi snarled, his hands lighting up with blue fire. "Love and attention," Hawks smirked, tilting his head almost mockingly, creepily similar to the way birds sometimes did. "Off. Nah, I just heard Ua is considering some sort of vigilante rehab course, thought you two might be keen considering the fact that your father is planning to hunt down your asses now that he knows you two vigilantes are his sons. I'd say you've got 2 days tops to get to Ua and ask for shelter and protection before that flaming storm hits." "How do you know?" Shoto asked quietly, looking at the bird man from where he stood behind Dabi. "Shall I just say a little birdie told me?" "Off," Dabi repeated, as though the words were all he knew. "Well, I've done my messenger pigeon job, it's up to you what you do next, adios." And with that, Hawks was gone, flying up into the sky. "Thoughts?" Shoto asked after a long silence. "I don't think he was lying about the old man's plan," Dabi says, before continuing in the direction they had been walking in, leaving it at that. "What about the UA thing? Do you want to be a hero like Endeavor?" "Not like him, but we could be good heroes, couldn't we?" "We already are. We are heroes without the commission forcing us to do what they want. That's why being a vigilante is so good. Do you think he will kill us?" "I don't know, but I'll do whatever I can to make sure you live." Dabi lead his little brother quickly away from where the hero had seen them, before checking them over. No feathers on them. Good. Hawks had warned them of his father's plan, which was odd. Why would he do that? Dabi didn't doubt it was true, which was even more terrifying of a thought. He refused to go back to that hellhole, and even more so, he refused to let Shoto get taken there. If they did this rehab course, maybe that would appease their father enough to leave them be. Or at least maybe the school would make them live on campus for fear of escape. That seemed likely, and it would keep them away from Endeavor. It would keep Shoto safe. The kid deserved that, deserved friends his own age and a reliable roof over his head. He would look into it himself, try to find out what was going on, but he would not involve Shoto in that process. He had sworn to himself to keep the kid safe, and bringing Shoto with him to actively talk to anyone at UA wasn't exactly working towards that goal. He would go alone. He spent the rest of the day as normal as he could, getting food, cooking it, and then finding a place to sleep for the night. It had to be somewhere safe, because Dabi was planning to go find a UA teacher, and he wasn't going to leave Shoto alone in a dodgy area. It was bad enough leaving the kid alone at all. They found an abandoned warehouse that if nothing else would make a good hiding spot if this whole thing went badly and they had to stay out of Endeavor's view. Then, he told his brother he was going to scout out the area, and not to leave until he got back. If he wasn't back by daybreak, Shoto would know what to do. With one last glance to check his brother was okay, Dabi left, heading to the area he knew Eraserhead often patrolled. It took him a while, but eventually he found the hero. Ducking into the shadows that would give him a good escape route while keeping him out of view, he called out to the hero. "Eraserhead, who's there?" Eraserhead asked, spinning to face the direction Dabi was in, but not seeming to see him. "That was good. I come in peace. I heard about a vigilante rehabilitation course and my brother needs somewhere to be safe from our parents. We've been vigilantes for years. I'll give myself up if it means you can keep him safe. We do have a program like that starting up, yes. Why are you asking now? Endeavor is after us, and I refuse to let my brother go back to him. I don't care what happens to me, I need him to be safe." "Ah, you must be fire, your brother is ice." "Yeah," Dabi agreed softly, hoping Eraserhead wouldn't try to capture him for whatever reward was surely out for his head. "I know you probably don't trust me, but I think the program would be good for you. You can stay on campus, and Endeavor is not a teacher. You would not have to worry about him. How can I assure my brother's safety? I'm not sure how I can prove it to you, but you will not be separated from him, so you can keep him safe at all times. The safety of the students in the rehabilitation program is our biggest concern. After all, no vigilante nor villain would agree to join in future if any of you got hurt in this trial year. I heard a rumor that my father is planning to come after us in the next day. How quickly can I get my brother onto campus and safe from him? Tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. You can meet me by the back gates if you want to avoid any students." "Okay, thank you Eraserhead, I hope I'll see you there tomorrow." "We'll see," Dabi agreed, before disappearing, leaving as quickly as he could and making sure the hero wasn't following him before he found his way back to his brother. Maybe, just maybe, they would be safe. Shinsou was used to being alone. More so than most people his age. He found comfort in it. Safe from the attacks, the fear, the judgment. It wasn't like he could be anything other than alone, so he had learned to accept it, enjoy it even. He avoided people like the plague, and the few interactions he did have with people often went poorly. The moment they realized what he was, what he could do, they would attack him, try to be some sort of hero, and Shinsou had to fight back, had to survive. He never killed anyone, yet after each of those interactions there would be his face, plastered all over every newspaper. Villain sighting. Mind control powers strike again. Bring back the death penalty for removing free will. That last one had hurt. A lot, but he had moved on, as he always did. He avoided using his powers as much as he could, and only made exceptions when he knew he would die if he didn't. Food was a main one. He would go long periods without it, or foraging for scraps, but eventually even he had to eat. It was on one of these necessary trips into civilization that he ran into Eraserhead. He tried to backtrack, to escape, but the growling sound in his stomach wasn't exactly helping his stealth attempts. Kid, I'm not going to hurt you." "Yeah right, everyone does, why wouldn't you?" Shinsou snapped, still backing away desperately. "I won't." There, Shinsou had him. Go home, and just like that, he was safe. Eraser left, and Shinsou found himself some food, bracing himself for the next set of newspapers. He could practically hear the title already, Eraserhead taken down by villain. Shinsou did not plan on coming back for a long time. Surprisingly, the newspapers did not say anything about it at all. Not the next day, or the day after or anything at all. When it came time to enter the city again, he carefully avoided the place he had last seen the hero. It was quieter this time, and the next, but of course his luck wouldn't last long. "Shinsou is it? I read your file kid. You've been through a lot, but I don't think you were a villain," Eraser started when they met again. "What?" Shinsou asked, desperately hoping the hero would respond and he could escape again. "If you were a villain, you wouldn't have just sent me home a few weeks ago," Eraserhead explained, causing Shinsou to start. Why hadn't his powers worked? Then he realized. Of course, the hero must be using his own powers. That was bad. That was very, very, very bad. Please, please, I don't mean any harm. I just need to get some food and I'll be gone. You won't see me again. I swear. Please just let me go. Shinsou begged, and of course his stomach rumbled, adding evidence to his pleas. Kid, when was the last time you ate something? The question caught him off guard. He had expected the hero to say a lot of things, but that was not one of them. Last week, I think, Shinsou replied, uncertain as to what the hero wanted from him. Kid, Shinsou flinched, his hands going up to cover his head as he stumbled backwards, pure terror filling him. Eraserhead was going to kill him. He was going to die. It was going to happen. He should never have come into the city. He could have survived a few more days. He was greedy. This was his punishment. Hey, I'm sorry, I'm not going to hurt you, just, let me get you some food, okay? You clearly need it. Do you not have access to food? There must be food banks around here at least. I'm not allowed to go in there. They'll kill me. They said so last time I tried. I don't want to steal, I swear, but I need to eat. I need to. Please, please don't send me to prison. They would kill me. I know it. I know it. Hey, breathe, you are okay. You aren't in trouble. I have a place you can go. You'll be able to eat every day and you will be safe. Does that sound good? I know what you're doing. You're going to put me in foster care again. I can't go through that. Not again. They hate me. Please, everyone hates me. They'll muzzle me, or kill me, or something. Please, I can't do that again. I can't. No, I was going to offer you a place at UA. We have on-campus dorms for a new program. A villain and vigilante rehabilitation program. You would be safe there, any criminal record wiped clean too. I'm not a hero. I can't be a hero. No one wants me as a hero, Shinsou replied, practically rambling with the anxiety. He would die there. People would kill him. People were dangerous. People are dangerous. I think you are underselling yourself, kid. You can prove to everyone that you aren't a villain, and get all the free food, drinks and shelter you could possibly want. That did sound nice, but there had to be a catch. There was always a catch. That's how these things work. What's the catch? I guess the catch would be that you are stuck at UA. We won't be letting you and your peers off campus without supervision due to your flight risks. That's all. It didn't sound so bad. Maybe, just maybe, it would be okay. Besides, all he had to do was ask one question in class and all of a sudden, he would be able to escape. Easy enough. Okay, Shinsou agreed. Chapter text. Kirishima. Not ing manly man, Kirishima snarled at the hero who had dared call his friend dumb, stepping protectively in front of Kaminari. He wasn't exactly the sort of person to pick a fight, but the moment his friends were in trouble he could be murderous. Kiri, Mina warned softly next to him, warning him of the danger that was attacking a hero. It wasn't like they were against fighting heroes. They did it all the time, but rushing into a fight without a plan was not smart. Yeah, listen to the pink bitch and back the off, the hero snarled, stepping forward. That was a mistake. No one insulted Mina, no one. Kirishima launched forward, and with only a second of hesitation his two friends followed. This was basically their job, find and investigate heroes, work out which ones were awful people. A disturbing amount did not pass that test, and this hero was one of those. They dodged shockwave after shockwave that the hero sent at them, and, with strategies they had trained over time, they managed to melt through the ground beneath the hero, and send electric shocks through the acid which kept the hero trapped. Kirishima guarded the exit, making sure he would not be able to climb out. Once the hero was thoroughly trapped, Kirishima jumped in with him, gripping the hero's wrists and holding them tightly, making his hands unable to set out the shockwaves without the hero injuring himself. Then he nodded to Mina, who jumped down to join them, making good use of the duct tape they had stolen more of earlier that day. Once the hero was pretty much fully cocooned and distinctly trapped, Kirishima helped Mina out of the hole, and followed quickly after. Kaminari stopped spray painting long enough to chuck them 2 cans of spray paint, and together they went at it. Kaminari had the hero's name written in massive letters at the top of the wall, so Kirishima used his spray paint to add a list of crimes beneath it. Mina joined in, adding lines off each crime with dates of when it happened. Together they filled the wall with evidence the police could not ignore, leaving a space big enough to attach the hero to the wall. It took almost an hour. Seriously, this hero was so far from innocent. Not as bad as Endeavor, but still, it was a good start. They didn't have enough strength to bring down Endeavor for the two vigilantes that had saved them a year back, but they would. One day, Endeavor would not get away free. They wouldn't let him. Is it time? Denki asked, stepping back to admire their work. I think so, Mina agreed. Kirishima didn't even have to ask what they were talking about, simply finding his way back to the hero, and pulling him from the hole, flopping the hero in front of the wall of crimes. Denki pulled out his computer to make sure his code would still work and make the call untraceable, while Mina helped tape the hero to the wall. Ready, Kirishima called to Denki. Ready, Denki agreed. Mina and Kirishima joined him, laughing as they called the same detective as always. A truth has been revealed, Mina began, carefully changing her voice to something pretty much unrecognizable as hers. A wolf in sheep's clothing is found, Kirishima added, his part of the mantra complete. Just sitting here on Yarrow Park, waiting for you. Denki finished, ending the call. The three burst into laughter as they ran off, getting as far from the scene as possible. Another one bites the dust. Denki grins in a sing-song tone, causing another round of laughter as the three raced through the streets. They didn't even try to hide, knowing that a trio of laughing teenagers was not the villains the heroes would be looking for. Not yet, at least. Once they were far enough away to stop running, they quieted, moved to hiding, being much more careful with their movements. Together they headed back to the junkyard they had claimed as their own, a makeshift home made from an old car, some cupboards, an old tent and a few other random bits and pieces. It wasn't much, but it was home. Mina, this was good. Her friends were here, close by and safe. They were safe, they were taking down corrupt heroes, and they were safe. That was what mattered. More than anything, she didn't care what happened, as long as she and her friends were safe. That was why she went to investigate the weird sound that wasn't far away during her turn on watch. That was why she was here, alone, staring straight at the one hero they had wanted to take down from the start. The one hero they knew they couldn't take down. Endeavor. She scampered away, panic filling her, but it was well and truly too late. Endeavor had seen her. You fancy yourself a vigilante, hey? Endeavor sneered, stepping towards her with a deliberateness that reminded Mina of a wolf stalking its prey. I don't know what you're talking about. Mina cried, desperate to escape. She couldn't die here, couldn't get caught either. She had to escape, had to get out somehow, to warn her friends. She had to. She had to. Relax, girl. Endeavor snarled, a deeply degrading undertone to his voice. I don't care about you. I want to find fire and ice. Those bitches need to be chained up and taught a lesson before they kill someone and ruin everything. Mina stared at the hero in horror. He was talking about Shoto and Dabi. About his own kids. Like that. Like rabid dogs. What a monster. Mina didn't know the two well, but they had saved her and her friends. They were good people, kind people. I don't know where they are. I swear, I've met them like one time. That's it, and it was years ago. Back before Ice was even much of a fighter. It wasn't true. They liked to keep tabs on the two vigilantes, but maybe it would appease the hero. It did not. Don't lie to me, girl. I'm not an idiot. Tell me where the two bitches are, and I will leave you and your friends alone. If not, I will set this whole junkyard on fire, and trust me, you would not make it out. Your friends would be dead before they so much as woke up. Is that what you want? Mina shook her head desperately, scrambling even further away, wincing when her back hit something, stopping her getting any further away. I don't know where they are exactly. They usually sleep around 5 kilometers east of here. They find a new place each night. I have no idea where exactly though. Please don't hurt me, Mina begged. It wasn't exactly where they were, more like 7 or 8 kilometers southeast, but close enough that Endeavor might not know better. She would find a way to get a warning to them if she could, but she had to keep her friends alive first and foremost. That was what mattered to her. Good choice. I will spare you this once, but if you say so much as a single bad word about heroes again, I will not hesitate to hunt you down and kill you. Understood. Endeavor warned. Mina nodded her head desperately, and Endeavor took off with a burst of flame, leaving her screaming as the fire licked at her ankles, burning them. She launched back, sprinting towards her friends despite the agonizing burns. They had to get out. Now, she did not trust Endeavor to not take it out on them if he didn't find the two. Kaminari. Denki was panicking. He had woken up to Mina's scream, and immediately both he and Kirishima had rushed outside to find her. She had barreled into them, sobbing, and warning them that Endeavor was here. That he had come after her to get to Shoto and Dabi. More than anything, Denki was focusing on not letting his quirk out of control, despite the way he wanted to let it fly out of him, attacking everyone and everything. He couldn't do that. His friends needed him. He wouldn't leave them to deal with him in his dumb state. They were packing everything frantically, making sure they had all the food, water, and materials they needed to keep going. Then, they left. They had no idea where they were going other than away from here. And not east. Endeavor was east. Mina, we have to get something for your ankles, Kirishima pointed out when Mina stumbled, almost falling for the third time. What can we do? We aren't welcome in any hospitals, and we agreed Toga's price was too high to pay. Too high for small things. For things we could steal, Kirishima argued, despite him being actively unable to donate the blood. He'd never gotten past his fear of needles, and as much as he tried, his skin would always go too hard to get blood out. Mina wasn't a good choice either. She had been taking iron tablets before she'd ended up on the streets, and they couldn't do much about the low iron now, but blood donations weren't exactly an option. I'll do it, Denki stated. He also hated needles, and would avoid them if he could, but Kirishima was right. Mina needed help. Kami, you don't have to. I will be fine. It will heal. And if it gets infected? What then? We need to deal with it now before it gets worse. Okay, I'm fine with it. Don't argue on this. Are you sure, man? Kirishima asked, looking at him, seeming to be calculating something. Yeah, I'm sure. Then we should do it, Kirishima agreed before Mina could argue. Do what? A voice asked, startling the group. It was the middle of the night. Who the hell was out here? Who are you? Kaminari yelled, stepping next to Kirishima to keep Mina behind them. She was already hurt. He wouldn't let it get worse. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. I'm Mike. I was just listening, and I heard, and it sounded serious. I thought maybe I could help. Mike? Kirishima asked, sounding confused, but Denki froze, recognizing the voice. Present Mike, the hero. Oh, they were Ed. That's Present Mike, Kiri, Denki hissed, and Kirishima gasped in recognition. We don't want any trouble. Please, just let us go on our way, Kirishima called, but of course that was the moment Mina's legs gave out completely. Immediately Kirishima was turning to help her, and it was just Denki left to defend them from the hero. Is she okay? Present Mike yelled, sounding panicked, but not using his quirk. She's fine, Denki snapped, muttering the last part under his breath, no thanks to Endeavor. Endeavor did this. Oh, he had heard that, to a kid. I swear Eraser is going to kill that guy at this rate. After what Dabi told him. Dabi talked to Eraserhead. Denki asked, shocked. Sure, Eraserhead had well and truly passed their test, but still, Dabi didn't trust anyone, much less heroes. Yeah, he talked about joining the Vigilante and Villain Rehabilitation Program at UA. Oh hey wait, you guys are the ones who have been taking down corrupt heroes, right? You are. I recognize her. I was supposed to ask you if you wanted to join the program. We would keep you safe, give you a place to stay, some food, and we'd teach you how to be heroes. We don't want to be heroes. That's literally the whole point of what we do. We take down heroes. Denki snapped, more starting an argument to give Mina more time to recover before they ran than anything. So, you could do that from the inside, you know. Heaven knows Eraser and I could use the help. We are so close to getting Endeavor. We could use your help though. If you're interested. What's in it for us? I just listed the advantages, Mike replied, tilting his head in confusion. Right. Free food, a roof over their head, safety, hero training. The moment we show up they will put us in jail. We aren't idiots. Oh, that's the best part. Your criminal record gets wiped clean. You would just be normal civilians. Denki started at that, not being villains. That would be nice. If they really would get food and stuff they wouldn't need to steal anymore. If they weren't villains, they could still get word out about heroes. Plus, heroes would be forced to work closely with them. They could find so much more dirt this way. It could be good. We can't trust you, Denki pointed out. I can get her to Recovery Girl, heal her injuries. That was a good point. Recovery Girl would help. Denki had seen how bad the burns were. Mina would likely be out of action for months if she wasn't healed by a quirk. Yeah, they could get her bandaged up, keep an eye on the burns, and Kirishima and Denki could get food. They could look after her, but it would be hard without her smile that convinced strangers she wasn't shoplifting. If they tried it, well, 2 teenage boys were pretty suspicious to a mall cop, and they wouldn't have Mina's disarming charm helping them. It would be hard. They would be living by a string. Maybe it was something to consider. Look, normally I wouldn't rush you, but if her injuries need healing, it's better to do it sooner rather than later. Again, he had a good point. Guys, Denki asked, his voice quiet, trying to hide the nerves and uncertainty, what are we thinking? Mina needs help, Kirishima replied, equally quiet. I don't. I'm fine. Mina argued, trying to stand to prove her point, and falling, only barely being caught by Kirishima, which just proved their point. Mina, we're in, Denki said, not giving Kirishima the time to be convinced by Mina's puppy dog eyes. Mina needed help. None of them were okay with leaving her without that help. We aren't far from Ua. I can carry her, Present Mike offered, only to be cut off by both Denki and Kirishima yelling against that. No way. They were going with the hero, but they did not trust him. It was that simple. Bakugo continued to chase off anyone other than Recovery Girl who dared go near Izuku. No one touched his friend. At least they did him the favor of letting him stay next to Izuku as the boy slept off the exhaustion Recovery Girl's quirk caused. He had been terrified that he would be dragged away from Izuku in cuffs, but that was yet to happen. Maybe it would happen soon, but for now he was with Izuku. Hey kid, Eraserhead's voice called from the doorway. Immediately Bakugo was up, spinning around and placing himself between the hero and his friend. He readied his hands to explode but could see the hero's glowing red eyes. His quirk would not be available to use. Still, Bakugo knew how to fight dirty, quirk or no quirk. Izuku had made sure of that. Eraser's hands were up quickly, not ready to fight, but in a motion of surrender. I come in peace, with an offer for you. Who says I want anything from you? You care about him, right? Yes, Bakugo growled. If the hero was about to threaten Izuku, he would not live to see another day. He didn't care what Izuku had to say against it. Wouldn't he want a place to stay that is safe? I did my research. You were living where I found you. I'm offering you food, somewhere to live, and your criminal records wiped clean. Why? Bakugo asked shortly. He in no way trusted the hero. Because I think you two would make good heroes if it weren't for the lack of training and a license. You just want me for my quirk, Bakugo accused, because it was true. As much as he loved his quirk, people had always used it to point out just how great he was, and how pathetic Izuku was in comparison. He in no way planned to be some sort of gun to be deployed and used whenever. He had his own morals and values. He refused to be forced into anything. No, I want you both to be students here because you don't deserve to be forced to live on the streets. You are kids. Students. Yes, students. I have gotten permission from the Hero Commission, our principal Nedzu, and the police. I have created a program to rehabilitate vigilantes and villains. You would be the first two to join. What are you training us for? Grunt work, missile fodder. No thanks. I would be training you to be pro-heroes. What? Sure, that had been his and Izuku's dream for as long as he could remember, but a reality. No, It wasn't even a little bit. Izuku was quirkless, and Bakugo refused to do anything Izuku couldn't do with him. Zuku's quirkless. You will just kick him out and force me to stay. No thank you. He sounds almost as smart as Nedzu with how he dissected my quirk. If he did that without an intelligence quirk, then I think he would be a very valuable pro, Eraserhead pointed out, voicing the thing Bakugo had thought for years. Izuku wasn't helpless. Sure, he was self-sacrificial, traumatized, prone to panic attacks and a very loud mumbler, but he wasn't helpless. Fine. What's the catch? Bakugo asked. How expensive is it, or how likely are we to get sent to jail for something a normal kid would just be reprimanded for? What's the danger? Because I know there's something. You would be treated the same as other kids, with a few exceptions, Izer started. Of course. A few exceptions. What more could Bakugo expect? And those are, you would get a few courses the others don't. Things you need to deal with everything you have been through. You would have mandatory therapy that can be group therapy or individual, that's up to you. You would not be able to leave campus without a supervising adult due to your flight risks, and as such you would live on campus. Plus, all of this will be free, and your food paid for unlike other students who would buy food at the cafeteria. That's it. Okay, that actually didn't sound so bad. Bakugo was not a fan of the whole stay on campus thing. He had always enjoyed his freedom, and the therapy thing would probably, but going to school. He and Izuku had both missed that. They had missed learning new things, and they did their best to keep up, but they were far behind and they knew it. We may be smart, but we've missed school for the last few years. We tried to be self-taught, but we won't know stupid terminology and stuff. That's okay. Any extra classes needed will also be provided, as well as personal tutoring. Okay, maybe this would be okay. Bakugo would have to talk it over with Izuku, but maybe it would be okay. And if we don't agree, there's not much I can do to stop them arresting you once your friend is healed. Fine, but I'm not giving you an answer until he wakes up and we can talk. This is not a choice I plan to make alone. Okay, Eraserhead agreed. Honestly, Bakugo had expected more of a fight, but he wasn't complaining. The hero left, and he was alone with Izuku again. He slumped into a seat, waiting for Izuku to wake. They would work something out then. For now, Bakugo would simply keep him safe. When Izuku woke, he panicked. It was too bright, too white. He was not at home. They must have been captured. Had Kachon escaped? No, Kachon wouldn't leave him, no matter how bad it was. This was dangerous. Were they in jail already? Or just a holding cell? Did Kachon still have his quirk? Would they be able to escape? He didn't want to be trapped. Not again. Not again. He couldn't be. He refused to be. Kachon. He called out, wincing at the croaking husk of a voice that came from him. Zuku. Zuku. You idiot. You had me so worried. Don't do that to me again. Where are we? You know we are in their med bay. Recovery girl had to heal you. Are you okay? What? Why are we here? We have to get out Kachon. Before they find us. We have to. Relax. Zuku. We are fine. They won't hurt us. They actually offered us a place here as students if we want to accept. I'm guessing the other option is jail. Yeah. Bakugo sighed. How dangerous is it here? Honestly, I don't know. It didn't sound that bad when they explained it. We wouldn't be allowed to leave, but they also said we could have all the food we want. And our criminal record would be wiped. Plus, as training together at UA, we would be proving all those dicks from our past wrong. It would be cool to be a hero, Deku hummed, thinking it over. What about the other students? From what it sounded like, I think they are planning to find other vigilantes and, well, they said villains, so that's a bit worrying, but that's who they said they were planning to find. I think that would make up our class. So, we are basically an experiment. Pretty much, Bakugo agreed. Reliable food would be nice. And going to school. Maybe it would be okay. I think we should give it a go, provided you also want to. May as well, right? Izuku agreed. It was more a choice of this or prison, and Izuku wasn't keen on the idea of prison. He likely wouldn't survive there any better than he'd survived for his few years in and out of foster care whenever he had gotten caught on the streets. They could give this a shot, and if it came to it, Izuku would think a way out of it. Shoto was nervous as he followed his brother towards UA. Their father had gotten close, too close, to finding them. It had been the definitive last straw. Now they were headed to meet Eraserhead and learn to be heroes. Shoto hoped he wouldn't get separated from Dabi. His brother was older than him, but he couldn't stand the thought of being put in different classes. Maybe they would be together since it would be both of their first years despite their age. Shoto could hope. He didn't fully know how to feel about all of this. It was a lot of change with zero warning, but he did kind of want to be a hero. That was why they were vigilantes after all. They wanted to help people, but they wanted to do it as far from endeavor as possible. Shoto still got nightmares about their father, still found himself panicking when he saw red fire. Dabi was safe. Dabi was blue fire. Dabi was different. Shoto's right side, however, well, Shoto didn't exactly trust it. What if it turned on him? Attacked him? No. Red fire was not safe, and neither was endeavor. Dabi, Shoto asked quietly, tugging on his brother's sleeve. Yeah, what if they make me use my fire? We won't let them. Okay. They won't make you do anything you don't want to. I won't let them do that. I promise. Okay, Shoto murmured, nerves still high. He wanted to be a hero, but he didn't want to be a hero who uses red fire. He couldn't be that. He refused to be that. That was too close, too dangerous, too painful. We will be okay, I promise, Dabi insisted, stopping to face him, clearly noticing Shoto's nerves. They swore they would keep endeavor away from us. They swore we would be safe, and if that is a lie, we will find a way to leave. Okay, we will find a way to leave. I promise. Okay, Shoto agreed, a bit more confidently. They would be okay because Dabi said they would. Dabi didn't lie, not to him. He lied to endeavor to escape, lied to anyone trying to catch them, but he never lied to Shoto. Still, the closer they got to the school, the more Shoto worried it was a trap. He couldn't go back there. He couldn't. Dabi also seemed aware of everything around them, and that put Shoto on edge. Dabi wasn't completely comfortable, so there was no way Shoto was completely safe. Still, they walked on, nerves racking them, hyper-aware of everything around them. That's how they knew the moment Eraser arrived. Immediately Dabi shoved Shoto behind him, and Shoto didn't argue. He just readied his eyes, preparing for a fight if needed. Hey, it's just me, Eraserhead called, hands up as he walked out of the shadows. Dabi didn't move, so Shoto didn't either. Eraserhead stepped forward. Shoto nudged closer to his brother, nervous. Dabi would protect him, right? Our deal still stands. Dabi asks, voice low, one arm trying to hide Shoto behind him better and the other with a small fire already beginning. Join the program and endeavor will not be allowed inside UA walls, Eraserhead agreed easily. There was safety there. The thought that all of UA's armed forces would be keeping endeavor out and them in, honestly that was far safer than anywhere else they could be. They wouldn't even go to prison if they were arrested. Endeavor would find a way to force them back to him instead, so this was far safer. My brother has two quirks. He does not want to use the fire. Will you force him to? Dabi asked, and Shoto clutched at his brother's shirt, nerves racking him. This was the turning question. If they made him use fire, Shoto refused to do that. You will not be forced to do anything you don't want to, Eraserhead agreed, and Shoto relaxed. Maybe this would be okay. Maybe he would be fine. Are there any other fire quirks? Dabi asked quietly, a question Shoto hadn't even thought of. Not that I know of, Eraser replied, and Shoto relaxed again. Maybe they really would be safe. Maybe. He could hope. Okay, we will join, Dabi said, and that was that. Whatever happened next, this was where they were heading. Do you want to meet the others? Eraser offered. Shoto shivered at the thought of having to meet more people he didn't trust, but he nodded regardless. Dabi watched him, and once Shoto had agreed, he followed suit. Eraser talked as he led them into the campus and to what must be the dorms. Apparently, They had found 3 Vigilantes villains. It was unclear which the previous night, one of which sustained injuries that have now been healed. Then there were another 2 Vigilantes that had been found a week ago and had only left the infirmary the previous night. Eraserhead mentioned the names Kachon and Izuku, to which Shoto admittedly relaxed. He recognized those names. Vigilantes they had met once or twice. Blasty and Deku. We also have one villain. Eraser started, and Shoto gripped his brother's arm tighter. Villains were dangerous, especially to Vigilantes. Was it someone they had taken down? Who? Dabi asked, clearly following the same thought track as Shoto. His name is Shinsou Hitoshi. He's not so much a villain as he is one of you. The media just doesn't trust him because of his quirk. He's got a bad rap is all. Shoto didn't say anything, and neither did Dabi. They just had to hope they would be okay. Mina couldn't hold in the laughter as Denki burst back into the common room, face flushed red. She didn't need to ask to know something had happened. Guys, the other guy here is so cute it's actually not okay, Denki whisper shouted, rushing over to them. Mina just continued laughing as Denki got all flustered and awkward. Her friend was a goof sure, and would talk to them about who he thought looked good, so it was nothing new but the amount of blush. This had to be some guy. Did I do something wrong? A voice asked from the door, sounding terrified, confused and deeply uncertain. Denki Kaminari, did you run away from him and back here without an explanation? Mina groaned, putting just enough emphasis on the full name to make Denki whimper. Maybe, Denki admitted. Mina shook her head in exasperation, hiding the small laughing smile that tried to spread across her face. What else had she expected? Hi, you must be the other guy here. I'm so sorry for my friend. I don't know what to say, he's an idiot sometimes. The name's Kirishima, you. Kirishima greeted, being all friendly because of course the boy was immediately trying to make friends. I'm Shinsou, the boy replied, still seeming timid and unsure, but at least he was a little more relaxed. Hi, I'm Mina. I would get up to say hi properly, but recovery girl says I can't put weight on my injuries, Mina called, hating the feeling of being left out, before elbowing Denki. He had better get his act together or she would have to deal with the 2 of them herself, and she really didn't have the energy for that at the moment. Hi, I'm Denki Kaminari. Sorry about that, it wasn't great but it was something, and Mina could swear she saw the other boy blush slightly. Ooh, if that was going to be a thing, Mina was excited. She hadn't been able to play matchmaker in so long. Hi, Shinsou repeated, seeming deeply uncertain of what he was supposed to do. So, what did you do to end up here? Kirishima asked, seeming oblivious to how bad that sounded. Kirishima, Mina yelped, shaking her head, sorry, you don't have to tell us or anything, these 2 idiots just haven't had much practice in the whole socializing department recently. Oh, Shinsou nodded, seeming contemplative before he continued, me too. Are you with the other 2 in sick bay? Eraserhead said there were another 2 coming tomorrow, are you with them? Denki asked, far too eager and clearly not thinking. Mina groaned, dropping her head into her hands. She loved these 2, but seriously. You would think they would be somewhat better at all this. No, I'm on my own, Shinsou replied, looking at his feet. That's okay. You can join us, right Mina? Of course, we did say we were coming to school to make friends more than anything. And free food, Denki added happily. And free food, Mina agreed. Thank you, but you don't want me as your friend, Shinsou sighed, seeming devastated. I have a brainwashing quirk. So, Mina asked, tilting her head, it's not like you are going to brainwash us, right? Shinsou shook his head, but was still looking at the ground, seeming terrified. We're chill, man, really, why would we care about your quirk? I don't know, I mean I could make you do anything, I'm literally a villain. Okay, but are you going to do that? No, but Eraserhead said this place was safe, which I'm presuming means you are also safe. Besides, technically the 3 of us are villains, so, Mina pointed out. She wanted the guy to feel comfortable for some reason, and honestly, she really didn't care. Quirks didn't make a person good or bad. Acid wasn't exactly a friendly quirk, but she liked to think she was still good regardless. You guys are villains. Well, we've taken down how many heroes? Kirishima asked. 27, Mina supplied easily, leaning back in her chair. 27 dirty heroes, 3 villains, although that was more self-preservation than anything, and 2 politicians. How? Life goals or whatever. We hate heroes who pretend to be good and then literally break the law behind closed doors. So, we thought we may as well do something about it. That's so cool, Shinsou sighed wistfully. Mina looked at him with curiosity, trying to gauge the story behind the emotion. He seemed sad, and Mina wasn't sure what that was about, but she hoped they would be able to fix that. Shinsou seemed nice enough, even if he was quiet, uncertain and reserved. Mina couldn't blame him for that, considering he clearly thought people would only ever see him as a villain. That was stupid. Did you want to join us? We aren't really doing anything, but you can join. Mina offered, and Shinsou nodded, claiming a couch, and sitting down. They talked for a while, trying to get to know each other, with Mina periodically pinching Denki when he stared at the new kid slightly too long. This was going to be a bit of a learning curve for the boy who had never actually had a crush be a person in real life. They were midway through discussing the process they had created for taking down heroes when they were startled by a loud noise. Immediately Mina was on the defense, ready to launch an attack if they were in danger. Why do we need TO? A voice yelled distantly, and then clearly didn't get the response he wanted based on the next line a few seconds later. They are ing extras. Classmates. Mina guessed quietly, nervous about saying anything that could be heard by the approaching people. I hope not, Shinsou admitted quietly. Mina didn't blame him. The boy had unintentionally made it clear that he didn't trust anyone, and the incoming person sounded furious. Still, they should give the newcomer the benefit of the doubt. Catch on. I'm sure they are fine. That came from a different voice, much calmer, but distinctly closer than the previous yell had been. If they hurt you, I swear I will murder every last one of them. The first voice that must be this catch-on person snarled. They aren't going to do anything catch-on. We'll just meet them and then we can go to our room. Antisocial much, Denki muttered, but there wasn't much heat behind the words. If Mina's friends didn't outnumber or at least equal the others, she would probably be unkeen to meet them as well, and she knew Denki was the same. Izuku basically had to drag Catch-on to their dorm rooms, which was stupid because where else would they go? They had been told to come here, and they had been practically kicked out of the med bay. Still, the moment he entered the room and found 4 pairs of eyes staring straight at him, Izuku wanted to turn and sprint in the other direction. He couldn't remember the last time he had been around this many people, well other than at Toga's hospital, but still, that didn't really count. No one paid attention to anyone else there. Bakugo, being Bakugo, immediately noticed Izuku's tension and stepped forward, practically growling. Whatcha all starin' at? Immediately everyone moved. The pink one dropped her gaze, the lavender-haired boy winced, hands moving up as though expecting an attack. At the same time the red and yellow-haired boys moved forward. Hi, I'm Kirishima, this is Denki Kaminari, Mina Ishido and Shinsou Hitashi, the red hair explained, pointing out the different people in the room. Izuku nodded, not giving his own name, but accepting theirs. He would memorize it. Good for you, we're done here, Bakugo snapped, practically dragging Izuku behind him. Catch on, Izuku whined, we should at least say hi or something. Why? What do you mean why? Yellow hair Kaminari asked, sounding completely confused and a little offended. I mean I am only here for the food, shelter and medical supplies. I'm not planning to make friends, Bakugo snapped, and Izuku groaned inwardly, burying his face into Bakugo's shoulder. He didn't exactly have the confidence to talk to these people who would probably hate him, but he didn't love Bakugo yelling at them either. You do realize that is literally the reason any of us are here. We all need the stupid free stuff, but we may as well also be friends, right? The girl, Mina, pointed out. Not sure your logic has any actual logic in it, Bakugo grunted, but he wasn't straight up leaving, so that was something. We aren't exactly the biggest UA class, and we are probably not going to be appreciated by the other students. It would be stupid not to stick together, the nervous boy Shinsou pointed out. It was something Izuku had been worried about, but the idea of sticking together as a class, he hadn't thought of that. Maybe you shitheads need to stick together, but we can defend ourselves, Bakugo snapped, dragging Izuku out of the room and up the stairs. They found their way to the room Eraser had told them would be Bakugo's, and went in. The rules said no sharing dorms, but there was no way in hell Izuku wouldn't be around when Bakugo was at his weakest. They would take turns sleeping like they always did, one watching the other's back. They might have had the right idea, Izuku mumbled as Bakugo searched the room, checking for weapons, cameras, pretty much anything that they would want to know about. I don't trust them, Zuku. That means I'm not turning my back to them, and I'm certainly not relying on them to watch my back. Catch on. Fine. If they are still around tomorrow, we can talk to them then, but for now I want to sleep. Come on, it's the first time we've had an actual bed in years, may as well make use of it. Izuku accepted that, not bothering to get changed. He didn't have anything other than the school uniform after all, and curling up in the bed next to Bakugo. It was warm and soft, and if he had a choice, he would never get up again. This was where he wanted to be, curled up in a comfy bed, under blankets, with Bakugo wrapped around him. The bed has convinced me, we are staying, Izuku mumbled, leaning into Bakugo's chest as it moved with the boy's chuckles. Go to sleep, doofus, I'll take first watch, Bakugo laughed, ruffling Izuku's hair. The boy smiled to himself, leaning into the touch, and relaxing into sleep. He was safe, because Bakugo was here. Bakugo watched Izuku's breaths get deeper as he fell into sleep comfortably. The peace Izuku clearly felt right here was enough to convince Bakugo to give this place a chance. Anything to make Izuku happy. If Bakugo intentionally took a few extra hours of watch before waking Izuku up, well, that was his choice. No one needed to know. Once Izuku was awake, the boy brought out his old torch and started reading the same book he had been reading repeatedly for years, the only one he had. Bakugo didn't need to worry about Izuku missing anything. The boy's ears were fine-tuned, which made up for Bakugo's poor hearing, and the book was more a tool to keep him awake than anything else. With Izuku settled, Bakugo let himself relax, calming his own mind enough to drift off, safe in the knowledge that Izuku was comfortable. He woke with a start to Izuku lurching off the bed, moving too suddenly for it to be casual. Instantly Bakugo was moving, readying his hands for an attack. Izuku tilted his head slightly, listening carefully to something Bakugo couldn't hear at all. It was moments like these where he hated his bad hearing the most. What's going on? Bakugo asked, using their makeshift sign language they had created. Neither knew sign language, but with Bakugo's steadily decreasing hearing, they had come up with their own version so they would always be able to communicate. Izuku hesitated a long moment before signing back a response. I think there are two new people. Danger? Bakugo asked, and it took Izuku another achingly long moment to respond. This time he spoke verbally. Oh, I think it's fire and ice, remember them? Izuku grinned, seeming happy. Of course he would be. While they hadn't seen the other vigilantes much, they had met a few times, and Izuku was a social being by nature, if a little anxious. So of course, he had gotten along with the vigilantes. They were some of the few people Bakugo had granted his trust, which really said a lot. Do you want to go see? Bakugo asked, and Izuku hesitated for a moment before nodding, gripping Bakugo's wrist and pulling him along. If it were anyone else pulling him around, Bakugo would have screamed bloody murder. As it was, he just grumbled half-heartedly, truly not meaning it, and followed. By the time Bakugo could hear the two vigilantes, he could also see them, fire standing protectively behind ice as he so often did. Predictable bastard. To be fair to him, Bakugo was doing the exact same with Izuku. Hi, I thought you guys said you would never have anything to do with heroes. Izuku asked, waving excitedly at the two. We didn't have much of a choice, Fire grunted, a hand resting reassuringly on his brother's shoulder. Ah, same. Eraserhead caught us and practically forced us to. Izuku sighed, leaning into Bakugo apologetically. It wasn't his fault though, it was Eraserhead's. Bakugo squeezed Izuku's hand reassuringly, reminding him to stay calm and more importantly, to not blame himself. Stupid bad habit of his. Izuku was perfect, but he would not stop blaming himself for everything. It would drive Bakugo actually batty at this rate. Seriously, what was he even supposed to do at this point? Every time he convinced Izuku he hadn't done anything wrong, Izuku would find a way to start blaming himself for something else. "We didn't get caught," I said happily, and based on Fire's expression, that wasn't by much. Something worse than being captured by Eraserhead had forced them to make this choice. "Lucky," Izuku whined, because of course he was disappointed that their worst problem was getting caught. "You're the first people we've seen. We got here this morning." "Do you know who else is here?" Fire asked, always one to make sure he knew every threat that existed around him. "Oh, there are 4 others. We didn't really meet them properly. Kachon wasn't keen on socializing yesterday," Izuku explained happily, like they could just trust the others, like they could just socialize without danger. Bakugo wasn't stupid. He knew Izuku was just as scared as he was, they just dealt with it differently. Bakugo got angry and protective when he was scared, whereas Izuku put on a face of not being at all worried, pretending to be carefree, friendly, and social. "Oh, I see you've met Zuko and Kachon," Eraserhead interrupted, appearing from a corridor with a smile like it was normal and not at all terrifying. Of course it was terrifying, the man was a Ing hero. None of them trusted him. Not fully. "That's not our Ing names," Bakugo screamed angrily. So far Eraserhead had only really referred to them as Kid, or some other stupid nickname, but there was no way he was going to get away with this shit. He did not get to call Izuku by that nickname, only Bakugo could use that, and anyone other than Izuku who referred to Bakugo as Kachon was risking death. "What, I thought that's what you call each other though, and I couldn't call you Blasty and Deku, because those are your vigilante names." "I'm Izuku, with an I. This is Bakugo. He's not a fan of other people using my nickname for him," Izuku explained, an arm wrapping placatingly around Bakugo in a side hug. "Not the time to kill them. Right. Best behavior or some shit." "Right. Sorry Izuku, Bakugo, I'll fix that." "Thank you," Izuku replied, squeezing Bakugo's hand as if to get him to thank the hero as well. Like hell he would. Not a chance. Not a Ing chance. "Well, it is time we all meet each other properly, so let's collect your other classmates, shall we?" Aizawa suggested, and the group, although distinctly not Bakugo, all nodded. With a mildly annoyed grunt, Bakugo followed Izuku, who was following Eraserhead. The clarification was necessary because there was no way in hell Bakugo would follow Eraserhead. Shinsou groaned inwardly when he heard the knock at the door. The previous night he had locked it, decided that wasn't safe enough, and barricaded it with a desk. He had also moved the bookshelf over so it would cover the window, and no one would be able to get in. While it had effectively kept him safe, now he had to move the desk to answer. "1 second, he called, wincing at the way it probably sounded bad. He always tried to be perfect, he knew he had to, and telling someone to wait wasn't exactly the best thing to do in order to keep them happy. He pushed the desk to the side quickly, opening the door an inch to peek out. Eraserhead was there, followed by the quieter one from yesterday and his loud angry friend, as well as 2 other kids he didn't recognize, one distinctly being a few years older than the majority. "Hi," Shinsou asked nervously. Was he supposed to be doing something? He didn't think Eraserhead had mentioned anything, but maybe. "Hi, we are going to meet as a class in the common room to go over rules quickly and make sure everyone knows each other," Eraserhead explained. "Oh, okay," Shinsou nodded, slipping out of his room. He followed anxiously as they moved on to another room. When Eraser called, Denki answered, not opening the door the whole way, and looking nervously over his shoulder repeatedly. Odd. Eraserhead explained what they were doing and Denki nodded his head frantically, looking over his shoulder again before turning back to Eraserhead. "I'll get Mina and Kirishima and we will meet you in the common room," Denki announced, and Shinsou was pretty sure he had heard a faint sound of rustling at the back of his room. Ah, that's why Denki was being weird. They had probably ignored the rules on staying in their own rooms. That was fair. If Shinsou had any friends, he probably would have wanted that extra layer of protection too. Instead, he had just relied on the desk and bookshelf. "Are Kirishima and Mina in your room?" Eraserhead asked with a sigh, clearly coming to the same conclusion. I don't think I know what you mean, sir, Denki replied frantically after looking over his shoulder again. I would rather you be honest here, Eraserhead warned, and Denki looked over his shoulder once more, seeming to have a silent conversation with the two who were definitely in the room, before sighing and opening the door fully to reveal two makeshift beds on the floor and Kirishima and Mina both looking thoroughly stressed. Let's go, we will discuss this when we are all in the common room, Eraserhead sighed, not seeming surprised at all. Shinsou gave Denki an awkward smile, not really knowing what else to do, before following Eraserhead. When they arrived, Eraserhead sat on one of the couches, gesturing for the others to do the same. Shinsou awkwardly chose a single-person couch, where he did his best to sit correctly, not sure what was expected of him. The pair he had met briefly the previous night flopped onto a couch together, the loud one leaning back and distinctly making himself comfortable, while the other sat cross-legged, a hand gripping the loud one's like his life depended on it. The two he hadn't met followed suit, with the older one slouched and putting on a bored expression, although his eyes were moving swiftly around the room, clearly hyperaware. The younger one curled into the elder's side, tucking under one of his arms. The trio he had gotten to know the previous night sat more chaotically, with Mina carefully sitting upright, Kirishima next to her, looking comfortable, although not overly so, and Denki sprawled chaotically next to him, closest to Shinsou. All right, let's start with some introductions, Eraserhead suggested, looking like he would rather be standing but was trying to make them feel less stressed or something. Shinsou wasn't sure what exactly. I'm Aizawa, I'll be your homeroom teacher, and you will have me for all hero-related subjects. Who wants to go next? I'm Mina Ashido, I say anything else? How about we go with something easy, favorite color, Aizawa suggested, and Mina nodded. I'm Mina, I like pink and blue, Mina said again, clearly trying to sound more confident than she was. I'm Kirishima, and red. Denki Kaminari here, I like yellow. Oh, it was Shinsou's turn, right, favorite color, what was that? I'm Shinsou, I like purple. He wasn't sure if purple was his favorite color, but it was his hair color, and the only one who hadn't done hair color so far was Mina, who had chosen two. Maybe that was how this worked. He didn't know. Name's Bakugo Katsuki. If I had to choose a favorite colors like you extras, I would go with orange. Bright orange, not that stupid pale orange or some shit. I'm Izuku, I like green. Do I have to? The guy who was older than the rest of them asked. At least your name, Eraser replied. I go by Dabi, I don't have a favorite color. I'm Shoto, I don't really know what color is my favorite, but I know I don't like red. Sorry Kirishima. That's all good, man. Everyone has different preferences, Kirishima said happily, like it was the most normal thing in the world. He was weirdly chill and happy, and Shinsou didn't really understand it, but he tried not to question it too much. Alright, before we go much further, I'm going to go over the rules and what happens if you break them, Aizawa explained, and Shinsou winced internally. He liked knowing what to avoid, but finding out what would eventually happen to him was always terrifying. Would they send him to prison? Or kill him? Or would they just hurt him? Sir Eraserhead, sir, are we in trouble for sleeping in the same room? Denki asked, stumbling over his words and not meeting Eraserhead's eyes. No, it was your first night here, I don't blame you for being nervous, and the rules hadn't been fully laid out to you yet, Eraserhead replied, and you can call me Aizawa, I'm your teacher now, not a random hero. Thank you, Eraser Aizawa-sensei. As for the rules, the most important one is that you must stay on campus at all times. If you wish to leave UA grounds for any reason, talk to me and I will see what I can do. What if we have to evacuate? Bakugo grunted, probably just to be a menace more than anything. Almost all evacuations will remain on grounds. For example, the fire evacuation area is still on UA grounds, but if we must leave, we will leave as a class, and you will stay near me. What happens if we don't follow that rule? Dabi asked, his head tilted in what looked like calculated thought. I will investigate the reasoning for it and decide on a suitable amount of days detention. It will have to depend on the situation. If it becomes clear that it will be a reliable or repeated problem, we will have a meeting to discuss the problems. If we get expelled, what happens to us? Jail. With the leniencies, second chances, and different punishments for your class, you would probably have to kill someone to get expelled. However, if it becomes an issue where you are pushing rules and becoming unruly, we will work out something else. Just to be clear, no punishments will ever include taking away necessities like food, nor will it include any form of harm coming to you. You said we would have to go to therapy. Can we get out of that shit? That was Bakugo. Shinsou couldn't say he was surprised by that one. He heard a soft admonishing, "Catch on," from the green-haired boy, but it didn't seem particularly argumentative. "No, that is mandatory," Aizawa replied evenly, not even blinking, as though he fully expected the question from the blonde. "Although I do have to organize you into groups or individuals, so we will do that next. Raise your hand if you would like to do individual rather than group therapy." Shinsou raised his hand, wincing at the way he was alone in that. Of course, they were all close, they all had friends, they all felt safer in company. "Can we do both?" The question startled Shinsou enough to look up, surprised even more to find it was Dabi who had asked. Given a guess, Shinsou would have thought the older boy would hate the idea of therapy as much as Bakugo did, but apparently not. "Yes, that would be allowed," Aizawa replied, this time while his tone was as even and controlled as before. He appeared to at least be a little surprised by the question. "I would like to do that, provided Shoto can be close by. I want to be able to hear him if he yells for help." "That can be arranged," Aizawa agreed, seeming to understand the response a little more now. Dabi probably had things to say he didn't want Shoto to hear, that was reasonable, Shinsou supposed. He certainly wouldn't argue it. "When you say group therapy, does that mean all of us together, or like just me and Catch-on as a group?" Izuku asked quietly. It was a good question, one Shinsou would definitely be wondering if he had a group that he was close with. "That's up to each of you," Aizawa replied evenly. "Which would you prefer, Izuku?" "Group with just Catch-on," the green-haired boy replied immediately, to which Catch-on no, his name was Bakugo, right? That's what he'd introduced himself as, nodded easily, as though it were obvious. Aizawa quickly moved on, asking the next group, who responded similarly, and the next, who again said just the group they came from. "All right, moving back to the rules, we had an issue last night with people being in the same dorms. While I understand you are all close and have grown up together, it is important that you don't sleep in other dorms. If there is an issue, I need to be able to find you. However, you are welcome to sleep in groups out here in the common room." "I'd rather we just told you we were sharing a dorm," Kirishima stated, his tone odd. The boy had seemed energetic and enthusiastic every other time he had spoken, but this, it was almost chilling to see. It was clearly not a question, or even a preference as it had been worded, rather a statement about what they would do. Aizawa looked at him for a long moment, then looked at each of the students. Shinsou followed his gaze, finding each and every one of the others set with the same determined agreement. Right, it was pretty clear what they would all do regardless of the rules. "I suppose we can rearrange dorms to hold multiple people," Aizawa agreed, coming to the same conclusion Shinsou had. "Would you like to be in the same groups as you were for therapy?" The group class whatever they were nodded in unison. That had been an obvious answer, but Shinsou supposed the teacher had been expecting as much. Technically it was possible they would want different groups. Improbable maybe, but possible. "What happens if we use our quirks?" Denki asked. That was a good question, although Shinsou had no intention of using his quirk. He had gotten in despite being a villain, but that didn't mean they would let him keep doing that. Quirk use is permitted during heroics classes, emergencies, and in other reasonable situations. It is not permitted if you are fighting, and it is certainly not permitted to cause harm to anyone. "What do you mean reasonable situations?" Izuku asked, his head tilting as though trying to analyze the hero's words. Interesting. Shinsou wondered what his quirk was. "If letting your quirk act up in a way that will not cause harm is a coping mechanism, I will not fight that. If you are defending yourself, or if you are simply using it for something that will not cause harm to anyone, that would be okay while on UA grounds. The most important thing is that none of you get hurt." "What happens if someone accidentally gets hurt?" Denki asked, his hands wringing in his lap forcefully, only stopping when Mina's hand rested on them, to which he started fidgeting with a small ring on her finger instead. If it is an accident, you will not be punished, although depending on how bad it is we may instate quirk control classes. If someone is intentionally hurt, punishments such as detention, or extra homework, and such will likely be set in place. It will depend on each individual situation, but as I said, you will not get expelled, hurt, or lose basic necessities. Shinsou watched curiously as the fidgeting blonde boy visibly relaxed at the statement. Interesting. He had to wonder what that was about. Alright, I think that covers everything for now. Basically don't hurt each other, don't leave Ua without permission, and make sure I know where you are. Any questions? No one spoke, and Aizawa seemed okay with that, nodding his head and standing up. Shinsou watched carefully as the hero's gaze once more flicked over all of them, as though he were mentally doing a head check. I'll leave you now to get to know each other. Try to intermingle, you will be in a class together for the next 3 years. It will be good to know each other well, Aizawa instructed, and with that, he did exactly as he said he would, and left. Chapter text. Shoto watched his brother curiously as Eraserhead as Aizawa explained the rules. He knew both he and his brother needed therapy, it didn't take a genius to work that out, but he was surprised Dabi had actively asked for it. Just because Dabi knew he needed something, that did not mean he would always try to get it. He would do everything required to get Shoto whatever he needed, but himself, not so much. Still, despite his surprise, he was deeply glad his brother was starting to look after himself. That would be good. When Aizawa left them to intermingle, the hero's words, not Shoto's, the group awkwardly fell into silence. It was pretty hard for a group of kids who had no trust in anyone except their close friends to suddenly socialize. Shoto certainly didn't know how. Well, socializing, how about we talk about our quirks? Kirishima suggested when no one spoke, and Shoto flinched slightly, along with his brother, Izuku, and Shinsou. Well, at least he wasn't alone in that. He wasn't sure if that was a good or bad thing though. Oh, me, so, I have an electric quirk, but when I use it, I sometimes overload and then my brain doesn't work right for a bit. Denki beamed, clearly oblivious to the way so many of them had flinched. I have a fire quirk, Dabi muttered after a few seconds. Right, trying to be social. Eraserhead had promised they would be safe here and had encouraged them to socialize. If this was how people made friends, who was Shoto to judge? It's not like he knew anything about making friends. The only person he would consider his friend was quite literally his brother. I have half fire, half ice, I don't use the fire though, Shoto mumbled, complying with this friend-making process, and praying no one would question it. I have a hardening quirk, my skin turns hard as rock, Kirishima grinned before anyone could question Shoto, seeming thoroughly proud of his quirk. It did sound useful to be fair. I have acid generation, Mina grinned happily. Interesting, nothing to do with the pink skin or yellow horns. Everyone looked over to the three who hadn't said anything as the silence lingered, and Shoto could almost wince at the way it was clear Izuku was uncomfortable, practically curling up into Bakugo's side who looked furious, and Shinsou's head was down awkwardly, not meeting anyone's gaze. None of your business, Bakugo snarled, sitting further forward, the arm Izuku was clutching tightly moving behind him, something Shoto recognized from what Dabi often did. Bakugo was protecting the other boy from what exactly, Shoto didn't know. Come on Bakubro, we're gonna find out soon enough anyway. We will be training to be heroes, there's no point keeping secrets. Kirishima argued, and Shoto winced, knowing what it was like to not be completely comfortable with your quirk. Most people didn't understand that, but he did. Off. I am not your bro. Hey, don't be a jerk, Mina snapped, immediately coming to the defense of her friend. Me, after he said that bullshit. You have no right coming at me Catch on they didn't know, Izuku mumbled, pulling Bakugo back when the boy started to stand, clearly ready to attack the three. They are bitches. Catch on. Fine, TCH, they are annoying pests, Bakugo corrected himself, glaring at the three, who seemed to have finally clocked onto how Izuku was reacting to the question. You don't have to tell us your quirks. Shoto decided to input, because he really didn't want to deal with a fight right now, so diffusing the situation seemed wise. It's fine, it's just. Izu. You don't have to. They don't deserve shit. I'm quirkless, I don't have a quirk, the boy muttered, and Shoto breathed in sharply. That explained a lot, but also added so many questions. The boy was clearly a vigilante or villain, otherwise he wouldn't be here. So, he must know how to fight, but at the same time, how was a quirkless person supposed to beat quirks? He knew Eraserhead fought quirkless, but he could do that because he could disable the other's quirks to put them at an even footing. If any of you so much as suggest he doesn't deserve to be here, I will kill you. Catch on, the boy whined again. Shoto was starting to think that was a regular occurrence for them. Bakugo would say something harsh and Izuku would encourage him to calm down. I have mind control, Shinsou whispered in the continuing silence. His hands raised slightly in a way Shoto was far too familiar with. The boy was preparing to be hit. No one moved. Shinsou finally looked up, seeming confused, and Shoto gave the boy his best smile. They weren't going to hurt him over something he couldn't control, or at least Shoto and Dabi wouldn't. I can make an explosion out of my sweat. Ew. Mina covered her mouth with a hand, her eyes wide, clearly embarrassed to have said that. Sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. Does that mean you are like always sweaty when you fight? I guess so. Bakugo grunted, seeming surprisingly unbothered. That was odd based on how he had responded so angrily to everything else. Shoto looked around the room, noticing painfully the way Denki was watching Izuku, clearly trying to decide whether or not to say anything. For Denki's sake, he hoped the boy decided against speaking out about whatever was on his mind. Unfortunately, Denki didn't seem to have much impulse control. How did you become a vigilante if you're quirkless? Denki asked, and in a second, everyone had moved. Bakugo was lunging, Izuku was shriveling back, Kirishima had activated his quirk, Mina was pushing herself in front of Denki despite her limp, while also glaring at the boy. Dabi had once again pulled Shoto behind him, standing up in the same movement, and Shinsou returned his hands to protectively cover his head. Again. Eraserhead said no fighting. Dabi snapped, doing his best to interrupt it. Do you want to get kicked out on your first day? I told those not to say anything and here we are. Bakugo snarled, gripping Izuku's wrist and pulling the boy up. I'm leaving. Get your shit together. With that, the two left, and the three who had unintentionally caused that whole exchange looked suitably guilty. Dabi sighed, sitting back down next to Shoto, satisfied with the de-escalation. I didn't mean it like that, Denki mumbled, looking at his feet, guilt clear on his face, finally recognizing what had happened. Quirks aren't a positive topic for everyone, Dabi sighed. Shoto and I certainly don't enjoy discussing them for personal reasons. Just because it's positive for you, doesn't mean it's positive for all of us. There is a reason Eraserhead wants us to go to therapy. I'm sorry, I can't remember the last time I talked to someone outside of these two in a casual sense. I mean, like, sure, I've spoken to you guys once or twice, and Toga as well, but not with any sense of reliability, and it's always about something. We're all trash at socializing, hey. Mina sighed, collapsing onto the couch behind her and dropping her head into her hands. Hell, you two didn't like talking about quirks, and I didn't even notice. It's fine, Dabi replied, and Shoto nodded, glad his brother was leading the conversation. He really didn't know how to do this. People call me a villain for my quirk. I don't like talking about it, Shinsou explained after a few moments of silence, clearly trying to add on to Dabi's point about quirks being a negative. Foster houses were rough, I was muzzled a lot, but even with all of that, the quirkless kids always seemed to have it worse. They muzzled you, Denki yelped, far too loudly for Shoto's comfort, but Shinsou just nodded sadly. How did it get worse for the quirkless kids? Kirishima asked, sounding genuinely concerned. That seems pretty bad. Every time there was a quirkless kid at a foster house, they would be close to death. It was worse than bad for them. Many had this knowledge that they would be killed soon. It was like they were waiting for it to finally happen, like they had a clock ticking down. I've never heard of a quirkless kid surviving the system. Shit, Dabi whispered, and Shoto dropped his head. As awful as his father had been to him, he had known he wouldn't be killed. He was too valuable for that. Dabi, however, had been pretty close to death before he escaped, faking his own death to do so. He had returned in secret a few months later when Endeavor was out of town, and Shoto had been with his brother ever since. Chapter text. Denki stared in pure shock at Shinsou's revelation. First about the muzzle, which made Denki's blood boil. The monster who would do that to anyone, let alone a kid, deserved to pay, and if he ever found out who had done that, he would immediately be adding them to the list of people he and his friends would take down. Then Shinsou talked about the quirkless, and Denki's heart broke. He knew what it was like to have no clue if he would survive each night he had grown up on the streets, but that seemed like nothing compared to what those kids must have experienced. The threat of murder hanging over your head from the people who were supposed to look after you. That was wrong. Worse than all that, was that Denki had been the one to cause the revelation out, and then scared Izuku into thinking he was judging, even though he had genuinely just been curious. This was his fault. I'm sorry, I didn't know, Denki whispered, trying desperately to blink back guilty tears. He had only been here for a day and already he had messed up. How long would it be before he got kicked out for his stupidity? Would Kirishima and Mina even come with him now that they had found somewhere safe? He didn't know which would be worse, if they came because then it would be all his fault they lost this, or if they stayed because then he would be alone. A hand on his shoulder dragged him out of his thoughts, forcing him to notice the worry Mina was sending his way. They had a silent conversation, Mina asking if he was all right, Denki nodding almost imperceptibly, and Mina clearly not believing him as she pulled him into a hug. It's fine, no one knows, Shinsou sighed, his legs coming up to his chest, arms wrapping protectively around them, forming a small ball. Denki hated that too. He hated all of this. Why was he so bad with people? Why could he never think before he spoke? He knew he needed to be better, but he had no clue where to start. Should I go apologize? Denki asked quietly, and immediately Dabi was shaking his head, his arm wrapped tightly around his little brother as he watched the group carefully. No, if you go anywhere near them right now the angry one will probably have your head. Wait for them to come back out, and if they don't, I'll go talk to them, Dabi instructed. There's no point risking yourself right now, they won't want to hear shit. How do you know? Denki asked, curious how well Dabi knew them so well. He thought they had only met today. Well, for one thing, I've had a few interactions with the two, and I know their dynamic. They are like me and Shoto. If anyone had said something to upset my brother, I would quite possibly not have had the self-control to stop myself attacking if it weren't for the risk of getting kicked out. We can't get expelled, he'll get us, Shoto murmured, tugging at his brother's sleeve with a quiet desperation. Dabi just nodded, responding so quietly Denki couldn't pick up the words, but Shoto seemed to relax at them. Denki desperately wanted to ask who he was, but he'd already upset one person, and Dabi had just explained that anyone who hurt his brother would not be safe. So, Denki bit down on his cheeks, forcing himself not to speak. Do you guys want to explore or something? I don't know what else to do, Kirishima suggested after a few minutes of silence, probably aware of the way Denki shifted constantly next to him. That was another thing that he needed to get under control if he was supposed to be going to school. The last time he dealt with school he had been in constant trouble for his inability to sit still, his bad grades, and his loud impulsivity. Shit, he couldn't mess this up for his friends. Are we allowed to? Shinsou asked quietly, seeming anxious about speaking. Denki wondered if that anxiety was similar to the way Denki never knew if he was saying something he shouldn't be, or if it was more related to his quirk. He had said he'd been muzzled before, but that wouldn't be for his quirk, right? Only he had been talking about quirks when he had said it. Shit, Denki didn't know. As long as we stay on UA grounds, I don't think there was a rule, Dabi replied, answering the question in a way that suggested he was used to answering questions and remembering information for others. Aizawa said we could get food from lunch rush at the cafeteria at any time. Do you guys want to go get something to eat? Kirishima suggested, and only then did Denki realize how hungry he was, causing him to nod emphatically. I'll go talk to the other two, They will likely want to know where we are. Dabi agreed, leaving the room with Shoto following closely behind despite Dabi not actively telling him to. Denki didn't blame the other boy, he wouldn't want to be alone in a room without his friends. After a few minutes of quiet conversation between his friends and they really did try to include Shinsou, but the boy was very quiet. Dabi returned with his brother. They didn't want to come. I told them you didn't mean to be rude, and they seemed to appreciate that, but wanted time alone, Dabi explained, taking his brother's hand when the boy started silently tugging at his sleeve again. Mina only really relaxed fully when Denki got excited about the crutches recovery girl had told her to use to keep off her burned feet. Denki was insisting she try cool tricks with them, and if it meant he wasn't stressing about their horrible social skills, then of course she gave it a go, falling on her face a few times in the process. They eventually left, deciding to head to recovery girl first to see if she would be allowed to walk normally. Her feet still stung a little when she put weight on them, but it really wasn't that bad. Thankfully, recovery girl seemed to agree, swapping the crutches out for a retractable cane just in case it got worse. Mina doubted she'd use the cane, but she took it regardless. Come on, let's go get some food, Denki begged, tugging dramatically at Mina's arm, and she laughed, following along with the request, even as her eyes rolled lightheartedly. She stopped after a moment when she realized Shinsou was looking at them with a confused expression. What's up, Shinsou? Didn't Aizawa-sensei give you food when you got here? He gave me some. Of course he did, but we're hungry again, it's time to go get breakfast. But, how are you hungry so soon? Shinsou asked, and Mina blinked at the boy. Shinsou had been here longer than they had, they'd only gotten in last night, and she was pretty sure he hadn't eaten dinner when they did, unless he had it at some other time. How was he not hungry? Because, that was yesterday. Mina questioned, confused by Shinsou's words. What did he mean? Of course they were hungry. Sure, they could survive without food, but this was about the time the soup kitchen opened up, and their stomachs clearly knew how to keep a schedule. Yeah, it was yesterday, Shinsou agreed, only his tone suggested that was proving his point, not Mina's. Weird. Exactly, so we should go get more food, Kirishima stated, deciding to finally help Mina out here. Took him long enough. But, that's so soon, isn't that a little, I don't know, greedy? What if someone catches us? Eraserhead said we could eat as much as we want, Mina pointed out, ignoring the way Kirishima whispered the correction of, he said to call him Aizawa. That was unimportant. Sure, but how often do you guys eat? Every day seems excessive. How are you hungry? We normally eat once or twice a day, sure it's less than most people, but it's enough. Mina replied, confused by what he was saying. What was she doing wrong here? Twice a day, Shinsou startled, staring at her with wide eyes as though she had just said she went to all-you-could-eat buffets every time. Of course not, it was only a little bit, just enough that she could get by. Yeah, Mina asked, glaring slightly at the boy who seemed to be, she didn't know what, judging her. Maybe. That's a lot, right? Shinsou asked, turning to look at Dabi, probably deciding he was a good source of information since he was older. Mina looked at the other boy as well, curious to see what he would say. Most people eat 3 times a day, apparently that's a health amount. Shoto and I usually try to eat at least once a day, sometimes we manage 2 or 3, Dabi replied evenly, seeming unaffected by how weird this conversation was, as though Shinsou was saying something completely understandable. How often do you eat, Shinsou? I thought I was being greedy for trying to get food after a week, Shinsou muttered under his breath, causing Mina to stare at the boy in shock, which only grew as he continued to speak. I usually eat once every 2 weeks, I push it off further if I can. How? Mina yelped, staring in shock at the boy who, how was he even alive? That couldn't be enough food, right? I can't, the places that give out food won't let me in because I'm a villain, and I hate stealing because I don't want to be a villain, so I try not to be around people, I don't want to end up in prison. Once every 2 weeks, Denki repeated the boy's words, his mouth open in a shocked manner, clearly as stunned by the revelation as Mina felt. Chapter text. Shinsou was confused, extremely so. Eating 2 or 3 times a day. That was greedy. Right, that's what he was always told. Even once a week was greedy, unnecessary, dangerous. Why would anyone eat twice a day? That was just asking to be caught, to be killed. They were villains too, shouldn't they understand? Why didn't they understand? Shinsou stared at the group. Denki, Kirishima and Mina looked shocked to their very core, while Shoto looked to be thinking hard about something, and Dabi kept watching him in the way the older boy would watch Shoto. Shinsou didn't recognize the look in the vigilante's eyes, but he knew Dabi wouldn't hurt Shoto, so it probably wasn't anything dangerous. He hoped that was the case at least. The louder trio practically rushed him to the cafeteria, filling a tray up to the brim for themselves. Only, they held the tray out to him, as though they expected him to take it. He couldn't eat that much. That was too much for even 3 of them. Maybe he'd eat about half of that if he hadn't eaten in over 2 weeks, but still, it was too much. I'm not that hungry, Shinsou forced out, his hands up, trying to keep the tray in Denki's hands as the boy shoved it towards him. He could not eat that much. It was too much, too much. But you have to eat, Mina insisted, seeming a mix of confused and insistent. Shinsou flinched back, not sure what she would do if he disagreed, but at the same time knowing he could not eat all that food. Let the kid pick out his own food. It's not safe to eat that large an amount if he hasn't been eating properly anyway, Dabi interrupted, stepping carefully between Shinsou and the 3 others, taking the tray from them and placing it on the table, before turning to Shinsou, his voice quiet and weirdly comforting despite the deep rasp it always contained. Kid, you should eat something, it's safe now, you can eat. Try to at least eat some rice at each meal until you've adjusted to eating a healthy amount, okay? But isn't it greedy? To eat that much, I mean. No, Dabi replied evenly, not even a little put off by it. It's not greedy at all. In fact, it's important to eat so you can build up your strength to help people and be a hero, right? I'm not a hero, I'm a villain. You're a kid, you don't have to be a hero or a villain or anything, but either way, it is important to eat a healthy amount, at least 2 meals in a day, okay? Shinsou wanted to trust Dabi. He wanted to so much, but this felt so wrong. Eating for the sake of eating. And doing it 2 or 3 times a day. It had to be wrong. Why would everyone tell him off for eating that much if it wasn't wrong? That made no sense. The world made no sense. Are you sure? Shinsou forced out, despite desperately not wanting to speak. He had to know if Dabi meant it, even if his brain was screaming at him to shut up and obey or run. It was either obey or run, he didn't know which, but he did know the shut up part. Either way, he ignored it. I'm certain, but if you want, you can talk to Eraserhead about it. Shinsou hesitated a moment before nodding, taking some rice, and at Dabi's quiet encouragement, a small amount of meat as well. With that, he ate in silence, ignoring the way his stomach churned, wanting to reject the food that had come far sooner than it had grown to expect. Shinsou swallowed down the bile that rose in his throat. He would not waste good food by throwing it up. That was stupid. Dabi expertly moved the conversation away from the topic of Shinsou, something Shinsou would have to thank him for later, and the group began to discuss what they thought might happen while they were here. Today wasn't a school day, so thankfully they didn't have much to fear about when it came to students, not yet at least. So, instead they talked about what they thought the classes might cover. Denki seemed horrified at the idea of maths and English and, well, all generic school subjects, but he was clearly trying to hide that, so Shinsou didn't bring it up. Mina theorized that they would be able to make costumes for themselves since they were in the hero course, and that made Shinsou wince again. Imagine how many more people would think he was a villain if he dressed up like one. There was nothing separating a villain's costume and a hero's one, so he knew what people would think when someone with a quirk like his wore a costume. The others clearly didn't share the same thought, seeming more excited about creating a costume than anything else. Shinsou was immensely grateful when the group returned to their dorms, and he quickly excused himself to his dorm. Not to hide, of course not. The blinds hanging down and covering the windows and the desk blocking the door were unrelated. It just happened to be like that. He wasn't hiding. Shinsou relaxed in the quiet of his room, curling up to do nothing, the energy-conserving strategy he had grown to rely on. Maybe that had something to do with his apparently extremely weird food intake, maybe that was why he could never get enough energy. Shinsou wasn't really sure how that all worked. Shinsou didn't actually fall asleep until the clock read 4 o'clock, and he knew that meant he'd only get 3 hours of sleep, but he didn't care. That was pretty on par. Shinsou may always be tired, but he spent far more time zoned out in his comfortable not quite asleep not quite awake nothingness state. He remembered vaguely that Denki had come to ask him if he would join them for dinner about 10 hours prior to falling asleep, but the thought of even more food had sickened him. He said he'd eat later. He wouldn't. It was now 7:02 on the clock and the beeping alarm still hadn't stopped. He dragged it into his hands, trying every single button until finally the thing shut up. With a groan, Shinsou forced himself up to standing, changing into the provided school uniform. He struggled with the long red fabric for a while before shoving it into his pocket, not knowing what he was supposed to do with it. The uniform was softer than anything he'd ever worn, but at the same time it was extremely constricting. He didn't know what to think about that. With a sigh, he left his room, not knowing what else he could do. When he rejected Denki's offer of food for breakfast, Dabi quietly pressed a red fruit into his hands. "You don't have to eat it, but you should have something in case you change your mind," Dabi explained quietly, before returning to Shoto's side, helping the boy with the red fabric. Noticing what Dabi was doing, Shinsou took the chance to try to mimic the movements, fumbling through it until the fabric was knotted around his throat. It wasn't as smooth as Dabi's or Shoto's, but it was similar to Denki and Kirishima's, so it was fine. When Bakugo and Izuku appeared, Shinsou noted that Bakugo hadn't bothered with the red fabric at all, while Izuku's was somehow even messier than his own. Shinsou swiftly left the kitchen when Bakugo started grumbling about having to share the kitchen. Izuku tried to reject the idea of food much like Shinsou had, but Bakugo shoved him a bowl of rice regardless, and Izuku's complaints died down quickly. Chapter text. It had taken a while for Bakugo to calm down the previous day, and Izuku had ended up just leaning into the annoyed boy tiredly, soaking in Bakugo's protective anger. Dabi had appeared a few times over the rest of the day, knocking quietly and making himself known. Izuku had to say, he really didn't mind the older boy. Most people were at least a little stressful and worrying, but Dabi just reminded him of Bakugo, although with less loud anger. He felt safe. Izuku's watch while Bakugo slept was uneventful, so he fell asleep easily when they swapped over. He was shaken gently awake in the way Bakugo only did if they were safe. It was uncommon that they had to worry about waking each other up, but sometimes they had decided to go somewhere and specifically woke up at a certain time. Today was similar. After all, they had to go to school. Izuku couldn't help the way he buzzed with excitement. He had loved school back when they were able to go. It didn't matter that people bullied him because Kachon was always there to protect him, and at school he could learn. Besides, it wasn't like home had been particularly great. School was amazing, people less so, but school, learning, Izuku loved it. Kachon, do you think we will get to do maths? Oh, or English? Wait, imagine if we get to do history. I love history, Izuku squealed, barely able to contain his energy as he pulled on the uniform, displaying it almost like he were on a catwalk when it was fully on. Yeah, nerd, I think we will get to do at least some of that stuff, Bakugo replied with a slight laugh. Come here, let me fix your tie. Izuku bounded over to his brother figure, practically preening and barely able to sit still much to Bakugo's mild annoyance and amusement. In the end, the tie was still pretty badly done, and Bakugo was loudly blaming Izuku's bouncing excitement for that. Izuku didn't mind, just happily showing off his uniform to Bakugo and rambling about his hopes for the day. Come on, nerd, let's go get some food. You can tell everyone there about your hopes to learn about 100 different languages, Bakugo teased, leading Izuku out of the room. Izuku quieted instinctually as they were surrounded by others, but he still followed Bakugo, excited for the day to come. According to Denki, Aizawa had appeared at some point the previous day to let them know where their class was and told them to come down as a group. Izuku was grateful for that. It would have had to get lost and be late to the first class of this new school. Dabi quietly made sure everyone stayed together and was ready to go before leading them towards the classroom. It was when they left the dorms that Izuku realized he hadn't thought about something. People. There were students everywhere and Izuku didn't know how to deal with that. What was he supposed to do? Why were they all staring at him? Had he done something wrong? He clung onto Bakugo, trying to calm his breathing. No panicking. No panicking when other people can see you. They will know you're weak. Don't panic. You can't panic. Zuku, you're okay, Bakugo whispered into his ear, still walking with the group. Izuku looked up and saw the way Bakugo glared out at the other students. With a quick look around, Izuku's eyes landed on Dabi, who was doing the same. Shoto looked nervous, but Shinsou looked about ready to bolt with the way his head swung around, seeming to try to keep every person in his line of sight at once and miserably failing because there were just too many people. Izuku moved. His instinct to protect kicked in, and he pulled Bakugo over so they were standing by Shinsou. I'll watch the left, you watch the right, Izuku whispered to the purple-haired boy, whose eyes widened in fear, before relaxing a little bit and nodding. Not long after they'd moved closer to Shinsou, the others in the group also seemed to squeeze closer together, Dabi still leading, but Shoto, who was always just a step behind and to the side, was almost pressed against Shinsou. The three from the louder group crowded close behind them, and Izuku couldn't bring himself to worry about that with all the eyes watching them. Hey, a voice interrupted, stopping them in their tracks. You. I recognize you. And you. You are villains. What are you doing here? Someone get security. A voice interrupted them, the boy speaking appearing, arms moving wildly as he stood, blocking their way. Izuku tried to explain. Really, he did, but the words wouldn't come out. Villains. Someone else yelled, and then the hallway seemed to fill with the repeating word, accusatory glances all aimed at them. None of us are villains. Dabi's voice came stonily cold, almost dark, seething with the anger that had been missing from his similarities with Bakugo. Oh, Dabi was angry, he just hid it better. Oh, Dabi stepped forward, and Izuku was deeply glad he couldn't see the expression on Dabi's face because he could imagine the way the older boy's face would darken to match his tone. None of us are villains. We are allowed to be here. We are students here. If you would please excuse us, we would like to get to class on time. Hey, that's the mind control freak. I saw him in the news. Someone screeched, before the original boy, who looked like he was considering backing down, could do so, pointing at Shinsou, whose eyes widened, panic clearly filling him as he bit down hard on his lips, his hands in fists moving to cover his mouth, seeming panicked by himself rather than the actual words. Aren't those three the three who attack heroes? Mina, Denki and Kirishima all stilled completely behind Izuku. This was wrong. This was wrong. They hadn't done anything. Well, they had, but Eraser had said they were safe. They clearly weren't safe. Wait, that's fire and ice. Didn't you see the news? Endeavor said they killed like 50 people. They are on the top of the wanted list. Holy shit. Someone, get a teacher. Don't believe everything the news tells you, Dabi snarled. Endeavor is a bastard and an abuser. Endeavor is a hero. Endeavor is a monster treated like a hero. That does not make him a hero. Is someone going to do something? There must be a teacher on the way by now, right? Izuku cringed into Bakugo's side, anxious and terrified. He knew no one would know who they were. They couldn't be recognized without their masks and costumes, but he could feel the accusing glares, the way the entire school seemed to be repeating the word. Villain, villain, villain. Get to class. No loitering. Stop holding up my students. Eraserhead's voice cut over the murmurs, and Izuku saw the way the hero's eyes flashed red menacingly, almost daring anyone to argue. The halls emptied. We didn't. Why is Dad saying that? Shoto asked quietly after a long moment of silence, broken only by the heavy fast breathing of the entire panicked group. Izuku barely processed the words, despite the way his curiosity was instinctually piqued. Instead, he curled tighter around Bakugo's arm. He's lying, Shoto. We didn't hurt anyone. He just wants us to seem like the bad guys so people don't try to defend us. He's a liar. Okay, he's lying. Dabi is right. Neither of you would have been able to do anything in the time frame that Endeavor accused you of, and we are working on clearing your names, but a top crow's eyewitness is hard to argue against, even if it is a lie, Eraserhead explained. Huh, they were trying to prove Dabi and Shoto's innocence. Izuku hadn't seen that coming. He supposed it made sense though. UA wouldn't want anyone thinking the vigilantes and villains had snuck out to kill people overnight. It wasn't exactly the most positive view for the public to have. As they walked the rest of the way to class, quietly following Eraserhead, Izuku had to admit he was grateful they had been in a group. The students probably weren't willing to fight all of them, but if he had been alone when that happened, well, he had been beaten up enough in his life to know when people wanted to hurt him. He'd been lucky. They all had. Chapter text. Dabi was mad. No, that wasn't a strong enough word. He was the more than mad. He was furious, fuming, seething, irate, infuriated, enraged. None of those were strong enough. Someone had dared insult not only him, but these kids. They were just kids. These people had attacked them with no context. They had caused at least 2 kids to be verging on panic attacks. In fact, he wasn't sure Shinsou wasn't having a panic attack and just trying to hide it. Dabi could deal with being seen as a villain. He could deal with people not liking him, but these kids were just that. Kids. They were not villains. They weren't even really vigilantes. They were just kids trying to make up for the cruelty of the world. Just kids who had suffered so much. Too much. So yeah, Dabi was mad. These rich brats with too much money and too perfect quirks had no right to call them villains. To top it all off, Endeavor had lied to turn the public actively against him and Shoto. They hadn't killed anyone. They hadn't done anything. Dabi sent dark glares at anyone who came too close to the group. He knew he was the oldest, too old to actually be in school technically, but he hadn't gone to high school at all or middle school even, so UA had given him a spot regardless. So, he used his age and his scarred face and his well-practiced death glares to his advantage. No one would come near them again. Not if he could help it. Eraserhead tried to tell them that they weren't villains, but a quick glance around at the group told Dabi that no one was taking it in. Shinsou was shaking, his eyes planted on the floor by his feet, his fist still held close to his mouth, shaking hard. Izuku was curled up tightly under an extremely angry-looking Bakugo's arm. The green-haired boy looked to be mumbling something with a desperate fever, and Bakugo was practically growling at everyone around them while intermittently whispering softly to the kid. Then there were the 3 who had been proud to call themselves villains. The 3 who took down heroes. They weren't quite as rattled, probably used to being called villains, especially considering they had claimed the title for themselves, but still. They did not look happy. Mina looked anguished. Kirishima had a somewhat heartbroken look on his face, and Denki seemed unsure of how to feel. Dabi could also, of course, feel the way Shoto's warm side was pressed tightly against him, his head down, his whole body seeming to shake, then calm, then shake, as though he were trying to push down the shaking. As though he was hiding it. Dabi waited until they were safely inside the classroom with the door shut behind them, before he pulled away from Shoto enough to kneel in front of the kid, taking both his hands. Look at me, Shoto, you are not a villain. You did not hurt those people. You are innocent. You didn't do anything. Do you hear me? Dabi insisted, staring deep into his little brother's mismatched eyes, searching for any sign of understanding or reassurance. There wasn't any. But, my fire, what if I hurt them? Like he did. No, Shoto, you are nothing like him. You didn't hurt anyone. He made it up. I wouldn't lie to you, would I? Dabi insisted, and Shoto shook his head. Exactly. He's a liar. You didn't do anything. You didn't hurt anyone. But what if he killed those people so he could blame it on me? If I had just gone back, they wouldn't have gotten hurt. Shoto, hey, kid, you cannot blame yourself for that bastard's actions. Understand, you cannot blame yourself. You are not to blame. He did something cruel and monstrous and he is blaming you in an attempt to get away with it, but he won't get away with it. They won't let him. Not when we were here. They have evidence we were here. But, Shoto clearly wanted to argue, but he didn't seem able to find an argument, so Dabi squeezed his brother's hands and shook his head gently. You are perfect, Shoto. You are good, Dabi insisted gently, pulling his brother into a hug. Those idiots from the hallway would not get away with hurting his brother like this. They would not. Dabi stood after a few seconds, once Shoto had fully calmed down. He murmured an instruction to his brother to stay where he was, and he slipped across the room to where Shinsou was still shaking. Eraserhead was clearly trying and failing to calm the boy down. Let me try, Dabi told the hero, because while he was older than the others, he was still one of them, a lot more than Eraserhead was. Dabi had a much higher chance of being able to help and he knew it. He kneeled down in front of the boy, similar to how he had done with Shoto only a few minutes earlier. He had found that when Shoto was looking at his feet, it helped for Dabi to go lower and force the eye contact without being as much of a looming figure. He hoped it would work with Shinsou too. Hey Shinsou, do you want to talk to me? Dabi asked gently, not bothering to reach for the boy's hands the way he had with Shoto. He knew Shoto, and more importantly, Shoto knew him. It wouldn't be the same comforting a kid he didn't know so well. He watched carefully as Shinsou shook his head, the fist seeming to press harder against his mouth, as though trying to muffle any potential sound. Right, his quirk, his so-called villainous quirk. Do you want to write answers? Or we can just do some yes or no questions. Nod if you want some paper, Dabi instructed softly, and Shinsou hesitated. Good, that was good, he was thinking, which meant he really was listening. He shook his head, and Dabi was careful not to let his disappointment show. Okay, that's okay, we can work with this. Are you upset about your quirk? A nod. Okay, Dabi had been right about that. Okay, what else did he need to ask? What would help? Maybe. The boys seemed to be panicking, and Dabi vaguely remembered something about grounding by going through the 5 senses. Alright kid, I want you to think of something you can feel right now. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. Just nod when you have it, Dabi instructed, and after a long moment, Shinsou nodded. Good, that's good, can you think of 2 things you can smell? This time it was even longer wait, but then Shinsou moved the hand that wasn't in front of his mouth, pointing at the chalkboard and then at the hand covering his mouth. Okay, that was good. He was trying to communicate a bit more now. Dabi could work with that. Good, that's really good. Okay, do you think you can find 3 things you can hear? Dabi asked, and again, Shinsou pointed, first to Dabi, then to his own heart, then to Izuku, who was still muttering softly. Dabi smiled. Alright, last one, can you find 4 things you can see? Shinsou hesitated, then pointed at Dabi, at a desk, at Eraserhead and at the chalkboard. Dabi smiled. This was good. He could see the way Shinsou's hand was shaking less, not stopped completely, but definitely lessened. Alright, do you want me to ask about what happened or do you want to wait until you feel like talking again? Shinsou hesitated, before moving to shake then nod then stopping again. Right, instructions on how to communicate if it was an question. Dabi gently added, nod for now. Shinsou shook his head. That was okay. Dabi understood that, and he really didn't blame the kid. Alright, we can talk about it later, but I am going to tell you one thing and I want you to listen, okay? Dabi instructed, his voice soft but firm. Shinsou nodded, so Dabi continued, you are not a villain. You are not a bad person. You are not a criminal. You are a kid, a good kid who has been through a lot of shit. Those people out there don't know what they are talking about. Okay. Shinsou didn't respond. Dabi couldn't find it in himself to blame the kid. Instead, he stepped back, giving Shinsou space and an encouraging smile that promised the boy could come to him if he needed anything. Are you 3 okay? Dabi asked the trio quietly, and they nodded, not as enthusiastic as they normally seemed, but he didn't think they were lying. He looked to Bakugo and Izuku, mouthing the same question to Bakugo, who nodded. Dabi trusted Bakugo. He would not want anyone other than himself to be the one to comfort Shoto for fear they would say the wrong thing, and he imagined it would be the same with those 2. Bakugo seemed to have it handled, and it was clear Izuku was calming down. Dabi turned to Eraserhead. We are not doing that again, Dabi snapped, glaring at the hero. He knew Eraserhead hadn't meant for that to happen, but seriously, he should have at least made sure the other students knew they weren't actually villains, or something like that. Why hadn't he made sure this wouldn't happen? He could have gone with them to scare the students off from the start. He could have done something, anything to make sure that didn't happen. So why hadn't he? I agree. All the students should have been instructed to leave you alone and told about the situation, but it appears that either they weren't told, or they ignored the instructions. I intend to find out which. Can we not do that again, with the busy hallways? That was a lot of people, and I know that I sometimes don't have as much control over my quirk as most people, and I don't want to electrocute them all unintentionally, Denki asked, seeming to stumble over his words, looking embarrassed but also desperate. Interesting. Lacking quirk control is not a fun thing to endure, Dabi knew that from experience. Yes, I will talk to Nedzu and we will organize for your classes to start 15 minutes later than the other classes in order to avoid busy hallways, Eraserhead replied, and Dabi relaxed slightly. Okay. They were fixing things. They weren't just going to ignore problems. Dabi hoped it would be like that with everything. He doubted it, but he hoped. Aizawa never let his eyes linger on any one student for too long, aware of how on edge they all were. Dabi, despite his softness with the other kids, was clearly angry. As was Bakugo. The others were just quiet. This was not a good start to their first day. Had Vlad King not talked to his class? Aizawa had told him to. So what if the man had a bigger class than usual? Just because Aizawa had withdrawn from teaching 1A this year in order to teach these kids didn't mean Vlad King had any right dragging his class into their rivalry. He settled the class in, explaining further how the day would go, giving them time to recover from the stress. His plan had been to give them a variety of tests to see what level of education they had, but it was clear that wasn't wise. Not on their first day. So, instead, Aizawa did something he had never done with a class before. A game. Real and true and with no extra meaning. Normally the only games he would let his class play were ones that were actually tests or almost impossible challenges. Still, he remembered a game from when he'd been a kid in school. Do any of you know how to play hangman? Okay, so maybe it was a little bit of a spelling test, but not really. He scanned the class, seeing a few nods, although multiple students were shaking their heads. That wasn't surprising, not with their pasts. Aizawa explained the game, making sure to watch the reactions of the kids who had shaken their heads. Once he was certain they all understood completely, he began. Something easy. 1 word, 5 letters. Underscore 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 underscore. He drew it on the board and looked at the class expectantly. Izuku was the first to raise his hand, hesitant though it may be. Aizawa made sure to appear pleased as he nodded for the boy to speak. He had to make sure the kids would feel comfortable talking to him, and part of that was encouraging them through this game. Even more so, he had to make sure they knew that they would not be in trouble if they made a mistake. Again, this was the perfect game for that. Is one of the letters A? Izuku asked quietly, and Aizawa smiled, writing it up on the board. Underscore A underscore underscore underscore. Very well done, Izuku. Anyone else? Aizawa encouraged, and hesitantly, 2 more hands raised. Mina and Shoto. After a moment of deliberation, Aizawa nodded to Mina to go. Both of her friends seemed to be watching carefully, waiting to see if they could follow Mina and join in. Dabi seemed uninterested in the game, so while Aizawa would ask Shoto next, Mina was probably a better choice to go first. Is there a, M? No, unfortunately not, but that was a good guess, Aizawa replied, writing the M off to the side and drawing the head of the hangman. Mina deflated slightly, but she didn't seem to be upset. Good, she hadn't gotten it right, but she also hadn't gotten in trouble. Aizawa nodded to Shoto to go. Aizawa nodded, once again encouraging the boy, giving positive feedback and writing in the letter, underscore A underscore underscore E. He looked around and saw Kirishima hesitantly raising his hand. Aizawa nodded to him. Kirishima asked, and Aizawa smiled, writing it on the board and congratulating Kirishima. TA underscore underscore E. Izuku's hand shot up in excitement, a grin spreading on his face as he practically bounced in his chair. Aizawa, of course, called on him. B. Izuku exclaimed excitedly. Aizawa nodded, writing it on the board, TAB_E, and once again feeding back encouragements and positive words. If it weren't for this class being Aizawa's idea because of how personal it was, he would have suggested Mike take the class. Positivity wasn't exactly Aizawa's strong suit. Izuku's excitement made it so much easier though. The quiet, anxious kid getting this excited over a game made the game so much more worthwhile. Aizawa would have to find more games to play with the class. Denki's face scrunched up in confusion at the word on the board, but the rest of the class seemed to recognize it, though Dabi didn't seem bothered with playing, focusing on watching the rest of the class, and Shinsou was still eerily quiet. Mina, Kirishima, Shoto, Izuku and Bakugo however, all raised their hands. Aizawa was yet to call on Bakugo, so that was an easy choice. Bakugo. L. Very well done. Aizawa smiled as he wrote the last letter on the board, leaving it there for a moment before erasing it all and holding the chalk out. Would you like to choose a word next? Bakugo hesitated for a moment, and then nodded, determination settling in his eyes. He stepped forward, gripping the chalk, and started drawing lines. Underscore 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 underscore. 15 letters. Aizawa sighed lightly, at least the boy was enthusiastic and trying. Aizawa couldn't blame him there. Whoa, that's a long word, I didn't know words got that long, Denki breathed out, staring at the board in surprise. Bakugo just grinned. I'm gonna win this, Bakugo yelled excitedly, pointing the chalk dramatically at Mina, Pinky. Guess a letter. Aizawa was about to step in to say something about calling each other names, but Mina seemed to light up at the name, and Bakugo had mentioned seeing her before. Maybe this was a normal thing. Aizawa wasn't sure, but he let it slide. Mina beamed, and Bakugo grumbled under his breath as he wrote up the two A's, underscore 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 A underscore 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 A underscore 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 underscore. Denki's hand shot up, seeming more comfortable with guessing when there were more choices and less chance that he would be judged if he got it wrong. Or maybe Aizawa was looking too deep into it, he couldn't say for sure. Either way, he lit up when Bakugo pointed at him. S. He cheered, and sure enough there was an S in the word. The game went on, the students mostly going through the vowels, and Bakugo grinning wickedly when he wrote U and E to the side and drew the hangman head and body and glowering just as much as before when he had to fill in the letters. Underscore underscore O underscore underscore AS underscore I underscore A underscore IO underscore. For the first time, every single member in the class seemed entirely stumped, and a few people were looking around uncertainly, with no one raising their hands. Aizawa decided to make a throwaway guess to show them it was fine to be wrong. They hadn't felt bad with the U and E, but those had been good guesses. Before he could speak though, Dabi did. Dabi called, his voice flat and noncommittal, the guess seeming to be random, until Aizawa noticed the way the others relaxed, and a few hands raised only seconds after. Dabi had done exactly what Aizawa had been planning to. Kirishima suggested, and sure enough, Bakugo was writing the letter up, underscore underscore O underscore underscore ASTI underscore ATIO underscore. R. Izuku called out, seeming suddenly inspired, but it was only after Bakugo had filled in the letters that Aizawa understood what the word probably was, underscore RO underscore RASTI underscore ATIO underscore. Izuku had his hand up immediately, seeming to bounce in his seat with enthusiasm. It was clear he already knew the full word. He was clearly smart, he'd worked it out before Aizawa had after all. That was something to keep tabs on. Aizawa had known he was smart from the analysis, but this was a different type of smarts, and it seemed the boy had that too. Can't pick you twice, Izu. Bakugo scoffed, but it was clear he knew that the boy recognized the word and was trying to win. He had a competitive spirit, that's for sure. Oh, pick me. Denki begged, and he looked so completely proud of himself that Aizawa had to assume the boy had some sort of idea on the word. Bakugo did indeed pick Denki, who went with N underscore RO underscore RASTINATION, there was two. I only thought the last one. Shoto asked when Bakugo called on him, and the boy practically growled under his breath as he wrote it up. PRO_RASTINATION. Mina was the one to get the C, completing procrastination, and grouchily Bakugo accepted defeat, insisting he would win next time. Aizawa let them play a few more rounds, watching them carefully. Quite a few times when the group was struggling with either confidence or working out the word, Dabi would call a letter out, but other than that he watched with silent curiosity, much like Aizawa did. Shinsou eventually guessed a few letters, albeit nervously, which was good, although Aizawa was considering moving the sign language course from third year to this year. After all, extra communication couldn't do any harm. There was a lot to this class, but Aizawa would not leave them without help. He would make sure that by the end, they would be safer, more confident, more relaxed, and able to defend themselves. They would be okay. Aizawa would make sure of it. To be continued. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.